Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing live show number 229. I am one of your hosts, and with me soon, I think it's Katya. Katya, I see. Oh, Kat. Kat, I keep saying your name wrong still. Kath and Jaya. Hey, I still won't get it right. And this is our last show of 2019, which is going to be quite an interesting day. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Whoop, I got to bring it down before I get echo. How was your day?
It's going well, Lord. I feel like I should be asking you that. How is
Oh
your
my
day
gosh, it's been
going?
hectic and chaotic to say the least of all of this. So, well, holidays are holidays, as they may be. So, hopefully, you had a wonderful holiday week, some time off at least somehow.
Yes, here and there. And I have a 4-year-old, so Christmas is much more fun and enjoyable through her eyes, as
Oh my gosh,
Gloria
yes.
Estefan
It is.
says.
It is. It is magic. It is that, and Disney World's like that too. I think maybe when they're 5 and 6 is what I think is the most amazing. Where they're like, yeah, it's all good stuff.
Yeah, and they actually remember it. It's funny with the holiday times, when you're planning for it, it seems like you have all of these days to do things and accomplish things. Then when that day comes, you just kind of want to sit down, not go anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Christmas Day is one of those like I don't want to do anything but just be right here.
Yes, and then you start eating, and then it
Yeah.
doesn't stop, and every
Oh,
stop you go to is more eating.
oh, by far, by far. Yeah, you blow up at the end of the day. But then I watch the news and so forth, and I'm amazed at the traveling that people are doing, and then of course the challenges of people traveling, what they're doing. What was yesterday was considered the worst day to travel or something.
I found
Uh,
out day before Thanksgiving was because I was stuck in New York City at a light for about 45 minutes watching it change the day before Thanksgiving.
I'm sure there's been other ones. Yeah, they were talking about the fact of the amount of volume. I guess yesterday was the peak of the peaks or something, which is probably similar to what you were saying on the day before Thanksgiving. Is that? Hey, Mr. Robert Cole. Good morning, sir.
Robert.
Oh, I don't hear you
Happy
yet.
holidays.
There you are. Happy holidays.
Oh, now you hear me. Okay.
Now we hear you.
Do
Yeah.
anything. So
Wow,
I'm
wow.
not. I'm not up. I so wanted to be upside down. Oh boy, I don't know how
No,
Tim
no,
managed.
no,
I don't know how
that's-
Tim managed that last week. So.
That's a treat only reserved for Tim. For some reason, Tim is the only one that can approach the show upside down, which to this day I still don't know what caused that. But I mean, technology is great when it works and odd when it doesn't.
But only for
Mr. Rob-
some people. That was the interesting part.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, you sent a really neat, interesting list of things to this
Yes.
week, which is kind of fun.
It was a light news week. I was scraping around for those.
Well, you found some good ones. I mean, the people forget that the CCPA is coming up and rolling out in just a few days. And not that it's got
Yeah.
teeth to it, not until July anyway.
No, but I thought how interesting, Lauren, that was like one of the first conversations we had with not on CCPA, but on GDPR and the
Yeah.
impact it was going to have. And even then, and this was what, 2 years ago, actually, that we had that conversation.
Yeah.
Back then, we were saying it's going to hit the US at some point, and California, of course, is typically the leader for any new legislation. So we were
Yeah.
expecting it. So it didn't surprise me when I heard it. And
Yeah.
I was happy reading the article that it is actually not as strict as GDPR.
Not in that sense, but it has other teeth to it. It has the ability to actually crush a company because of the class action lawsuit capabilities.
Yep.
For those who may not know, we're talking about the California Consumer Protection Act starts January 1st. It gets its real implementation value July 1st. So you have 6 months to get into a compliance relationship with it. And if you're thinking, well, I'm not in California, I don't need to worry about it. Yeah, just like the GDPR, you need to, because it's going to affect how you deal and communicate with people, whether they're in or out of California. And there's 27 other states that have similar legislation going through the ranks right now. That's why big companies are crying out for federal intervention to have a kind of a blanket wide capability. So we're not going to, do 15,000 facets of the same flavor. But yeah, this one, the one thing I know strongly about this one, Robert, you can correct me on this one, is that this one, individuals can sue and they can be fined, and then they can actually create a class action lawsuit, which actually allows them to pursue to the penalty level, not to a certain threshold level like GDPR does, which says it's 5% of your gross revenue. Right. This one actually can just drive you into the ground with a class action lawsuit.
You can go for it. Yeah. Well, it depends on if they can prove that you're
willfully.
You've willfully done it. It's some sort of egregious, act, I think it basically winds up going to a jury and judges for how bad is this, how bad can the penalty be. So
Yeah.
that certainly introduces some risk as opposed to it's 5% for GDPR.
Right.
So
And
And-
one of those articles, Robert, I'm sorry, Lauren, to cut you
No,
off.
please, go ahead.
In one of the articles that you had shared on it, it says that a CA resident can only sue if their information is lost in a data breach caused by the company's negligence. So I imagine there's probably a lot of red tape and small nuances involved with even being able to prove that.
Yes.
And especially with the fines, it said $2,500 per violation, but $7,500 per violation if they could prove that it was intentionally done as far as data
Right.
being shared. But once again, how do you? What does that proof look like?
Well, yeah, and I mean that's going to get fought out in a court, but I mean all of a sudden you start diving into people's emails and you start looking at things where you say, oh, this isn't supposed to be used for this, or it's being, or we sold it to someone else, or we did something that you aren't supposed to do. That could be deemed willful. I don't know. I mean, it could be a process that's set up in the code. And you go, well, it's coded that way. I don't know. It's going to get very, very complicated. I predict there's going to be a whole facet of the legal profession that's going to focus on this. And I think they're going to wind up at certain points being, code crawls and things like that, where you go, no, this is the only outcome. It was built to do this. This was not a bug. This is a feature sort of thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, they even
it's gonna
self-profess
be
that
tough.
the legal system is not even prepared to handle
Right.
anything about this. And if you look at how legislation even talked to Zuckerberg when he was standing in front of them in DC, a lot of people are even unaware of how the whole system works on data hosting and retention and security and so forth, that it seems to be almost past the grasp. So, it's going to have to be a lot of education going on. There's going to have to be a lot of, as you said, there's going to be a whole fragment of legalities that come out of this where people are going to pursue companies just to test them. I mean, they're going to go up and push the wall.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not, and then come in and say, hey, you're in breach,
stuff, a lot of contingency stuff where it's just like, let's take shots. Just the same thing that happened with all those flurries of lawsuits with the hotel room occupancy taxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it was crazy, where legitimately in a few jurisdictions the laws were written that, hey, this tax is based on the price the consumer pays, and those were legitimate issues. You do the math and you go, hey, the consumer paid $200 and it's 8%. Where's the $16? But most of the other ones were based on what's the revenue of the hotel, which was a net, and there weren't really any problems with that. But again, you had all these frivolous lawsuits spinning around, some of them succeeding and maybe getting knocked down on appeal and just using a huge amount of time and resources. So, but I was approached to do some expert work for a group that was going to go after the hotels, and I told the guys, I go, you got nothing. What are the, they were like, oh, we're doing it all across all these jurisdictions in Texas. And it's like, all those laws are written, you're approaching this the wrong way. And they didn't want to hear any, and obviously I didn't get the gig and I had no interest in, being an expert on something that's just really fraudulent. But it's just really, they're going to be people coming out of the woodwork with my stuff was stolen and who knows what, and maybe the hotel did something wrong, but a lot of times the hotels just have no idea what's happening. Even that's the big problem.
Go ahead, Kat. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying like the drive-by or surf-by lawsuits. It's another opportunity, and I mean from the legislators' side on enforceability is going to be really difficult. Yes, they'll have folks that are testing the system, but then there are others that it's happening and it's just flying under the radar. The ones that you actually want to pay attention to.
And unfortunately, the hotelers are going to be the ones that are going to be relying on third parties to think that this is all going to get sorted out or taken care of them. And it just takes a moment to look at your contracts. Every third party you're dealing with as a hotelier has a disclaimer as to their liability associated with your relationship. So, like we're looking at booking engines now with ADA compliance, where, as you said, these drive-by lawyers that come by and chase you down for compliance issues, and it turns out to be your booking engine. And it's like, well, that's not me, it's the booking engine. You're still culpable because the booking engine has signed off that they're not responsible for that ad component of that. You're still on the hook for the fact that that service is being used by you. So the reliance that somebody else's issue, or it's not my issue, or worse yet, just putting your head in the sand, is just going to be, unfortunately, a painful financial one for most people.
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing with especially GDPR lays it out very, very specifically, and I think quite well. But you've got data controllers and data processors, and what's happening, who really has control over this, and then who's processing it, and those really are kind of the functions that you've got to get to. So. And it's hard to say even on these where you go, oh, we have no liability. If you have something that says, well, you're a controller, you're in control of this. Yeah, that was your decision to do whatever, to pick those people, and they're doing it wrong. You're now liable. So
does it feel like the end of a decade? It's weird. I can't even say that when it was 2009 turning into 2010, I felt at that time, it was doom and gloom and pain and suffering, and the economy was terrible and everybody was scrapping along. This one just seems like it's just a rollover of like, okay, another day, another year, whatever. It just doesn't seem, as monumentous as we're ending the decade. I do see some hints of how people are going to take on 2020 though, from a marketing perspective, the roaring 20s kind of thing, the nostalgic 100-year review kind of thing.
The roaring 20s worked out well, didn't they? Yeah. I don't know.
Kind of, but then the 30s were really not that good.
29 wasn't so good.
Well, on that comment, look, wasn't it 1920 when women received the right to vote?
Well, and that was when the problem started. I'm glad you brought that up.
Wait a 1 second here.
Kat just opened herself up for that one. The root cause of all these problems.
But you think back as to a century ago to now and so forth, and just the dramatic changes in technology and so forth. I mean, that's just an understatement. But the idea that from a hospitality point of view, what has changed for us? I mean, hotels existed back then. I mean, there's several hotels that are landmarks in New York and other places that have a 100-year history to them. What other than the methodology of service has changed? Have we really changed as an industry? Have we really done better for ourselves in comparison to all the years that we've had to improve by using new tools? And I can't put a stick in the sand that says that we've done exceptionally well on any certain particular thing. If anything, I think in some ways the focus of the guest has deteriorated. Maybe the truth of our message maybe has gotten worse, but or better, I should say. But the quality that we treat our guests seems to be more muddled for me, I guess. I don't know. That's just personal insight, I guess.
I've been very lax on blog posts for about 3 years now. I think it's getting bad, but it's interesting. You could actually should have written a blog post on kind of what happened in the around the 1910s, basically that decade, the teens, right, of the 19th, because you're saying in New York, Hotel Pennsylvania, right, that was the New York Statler, that was opened in 1919. Right. Yep. So that's and let me tell you, Statler developed a lot, that was all of a sudden the ensuite bathroom and things like that. The plumbing chase, even, from a real estate and design perspective of, hey, you know what, if we stack these rooms on top of each other and we have one common area where the plumbing goes, that was pretty a radical change of design. Right. And so, I mean, he did so many, the little lights in the closet and little notepads with that, all that stuff evolved in that period. And then, of course, you had cars, automobiles. Think all of a sudden people starting to mass, to buy those in mass. And that's kind of, the roaring 20s took off with that. So I don't know. We have technology that's doing kind of the same thing now. And there's probably some pretty interesting commonalities, which I don't know if that should scare us for what happens in the 20s.
Just looking back on the past 100 years, there's been two benchmark time frames. One is what you're talking about 100 years ago, where there was not a standardization, but from a localized inn or residency of a hotel located in whatever township you may have driven into or rode into, to something like the Statlers, where it was like, if I saw a Statler hotel in New York and I went to Ohio to Cleveland, I saw a Statler hotel there. I would think there's some commonalities between the two, and marketing came out of that. This is the first role of marketing where you're pushing and contriving messaging out to the masses. And then the other I would have to say would be in the 50s and rolling into the 60s with the standardization of branding, the Holiday Inns, the Howard Johnsons, where then the GDS, where there was an opportunity to be able to collaborate on transportation on a centralized system rather than having to walk up to a desk and hope that you can get a room or get an air flight or something like that. So those are my two benchmarks in the past 100 years. Other than that, I mean, now you talk about rolling into the 2000s where technology rolled into it, the social and so forth, which actually you had an article that you dropped in there, is social travel dead? I want to make sure we don't miss that one today because it's interesting. The numbers say one thing, but people's behavior says, I think, something different, at least in the markets that I'm working with. So,
well, actually, I think, Lauren, for your clients, what you could do is a great marketing promotion and do a Statler-esque one because, as you know, his famous marketing pitch was a bed and a bath for $1.50.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Well,
I don't think we can.
No, Lauren, it would be so great. You could unlimited. You could do it for a full year, and just think of the press you could get off of it, and the PR and the goodwill of those guests.
I'm going to go listen to the cat. She has a more intelligent statement. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I would argue that we are moving towards more or building up the guest experience now. From looking at the past 100 years, it went from a point where the trends were setting the standard for society. Like if there was a new trendy hotel, you went to that. Now with as much data talk as there was, and what we were just talking about, the trends are being defined by our guests versus the other way around, where they were attracted to it and then learn their trends. So there's much more focus on how to create something based on what the consumer is looking for. Versus just throwing something out there and saying it'll be great because it's the first of its kind. We've moved away from that model. A lot of first of its kinds are gone. So it's much more individualized and created, tailored, very unique experiences. So I think more data that we have, and as we continue having this data conversation, we'll see that it really is very guest-centered or experience-centered with the hotel industry.
Well, and it should be. The key is, again, going back to Statler, it needs to be service centric, right? And that's the part that's kind of, they say, oh yeah, we're guest centric, and we're going to go throw some technology at it. But the key is, Ellsworth Statler had three great sayings. One, still in the real estate industry, was location, location, location. That was his thing. That's how he figured out where to put these hotels. Find a train station. That's where the people are. Boom, downtown. The second one, the last two though, were the big ones for service. One is the guest is always right. That was Statler, and the second was life is service. Right. And those, I think, if the hospitality industry, being named the hospitality industry, would abide by those, I think, that would behoove the industry quite well, to put the guest at the center of what's important.
Good morning, Miss Lily. How are you?
Morning.
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well. Happy holidays, by the way.
Happy holidays. I thought I would come and bring some order to the conversation, but it seems pretty tame so far. So
it's very tame so far. We're being nostalgic over the past 100 years with our thoughts as to the benchmarks of our industry over the past 100 since. I brought up the conversation that it doesn't feel like there's a decade rolling over. At best, it's the end of the year, but we're rolling out of a decade, and I'm already seeing hints of the marketing strategy of some companies. The Roaring '20s mentality, the look at the fact that 100 years back now is something that people have enough information to look back on, compared to things get a little vague in the early 19th century. So it brought up the idea of what was benchmarks in our industry, and we're just think of those.
Lauren and I shouted down Kat because she tried to blame all the problems with women getting the vote back in the 20s, and we just said that is not right.
I think it might have been a little too harsh on that.
I think that's what it was. Wasn't that? I think that's how it kind of. I don't know. We'll have to roll the tape. We'll have to roll the tape back.
Yeah, I think it was a little weak first on that one, Mr. Robert. Yeah, we were talking about that. We actually started the conversation with the CCPA rolling out in a few days, and of course, what does that mean in comparison to GDPR? And that's going to be a growing conversation anyway as people become more aware. And of course, there's always going to be a first when it comes to newsworthy penalty. There's going to be somebody that's going to be lined up. It's going to happen. There's going to be a data breach. There's going to be somebody that chases it down. And then that's going to create the pattern of performance for, as Robert points out, probably a whole new dimension of law service when it comes to chasing those kind of things down. But
actually, one question I have, maybe for Cal, I mean, there are some limitations on it. And so the Jeffers, what is it? Jeffers, Mangels, Butler, and Mitchell, who are probably the kind of the preeminent hospitality law firm in the country, at least in terms of development. A lot of things that they do. The article that was written for that, I thought, was very good, and it laid out here's some of the limitations, right? Because you have to have annual gross revenue in excess of 25 million, receive or share personal information of more than 50,000 California residents annually, and derive at least 50% of your annual revenue by selling the personal information of California residents. Now, you only have to hit one of those things to be liable, right? So I guess the question is for my worry is that some of the smaller, players will go, oh, well, that's okay. We're under 25 million, or we don't have 50,000 California residents, or we aren't doing whatever. So this doesn't apply to us. So let's just, keep doing things the old way. I don't know how that necessarily applies now. If you've got whatever, a Days Inn franchisee who decides, well, what the heck, we're going to go do this stuff. Through the lawsuits, they're going to go, running right back to Wyndham, right? Because they've got a lot more money to shoot at. So I don't know. Have you guys looked into that with AHOA at all? Of any sort of? I know it's kind of greenfield. I'm sure that's going to get tried, but I don't know.
Yeah, I actually have not heard too much on CCPA specifically. Even with GDPR, it was a slow conversation going in because it just didn't seem like there was as much applicable. Of course, that has changed from the original conversation. I'll say that I have not heard too much, but I'll be happy to look into it and offer an update by next week. I know that on the education front, we try to have information out there. And Lauren, I'm not sure if Steve had reached out to you on that, or we were looking at doing a GDPR like part 2, but now it's
good. Yeah.
We were looking into doing more. So we'll try and get the information out there to make our members aware. But the direct impact it'll have on them financially is really what'll create a reaction. So until we hear legislation that supports that it will, like you said, those specific requirements where it'll sound like it does appeal to them, then they probably honestly won't pay as much attention as they should.
It is the right thing to do. It's like protect your customers' It's just like people checking at this. I mean, it took a while for the industry to become attuned to the needs, particularly women traveling alone. Just go, hey, you're going to be in room 413, Miss Smith. So that's not a good thing obviously not a good thing to do. And it took the industry a while to kind of adopt it, but the industry's got to go for what's the right, just like the human trafficking thing. Oh, it doesn't apply to us. It's like, hey, do the right thing. Look for it. Might be a little bit extra work, but you can really help out society with these things. And so unfortunately, the bludgeon is always what's our risk mitigation strategy, and if they don't perceive there's enough risk, then let's not put the effort into it, but maybe start steering toward trying to do the right thing would be my recommendation.
Well, definitely one thing from the GDPR perspective is if you take the guidelines that GDPR mandates for you to do, the data storage and the correct way of who has access to it and the methodology of security and so forth, if you just even take that core element to it, you're going to be fine when it comes to CCPA in that sense. If you can show a pathway of security, if you can show a methodology to what you're doing with the people's data, and more importantly, the ability to identify unique data and remove it. That's the one element that GDPR doesn't really push hard on, is the ability for removal of data. It talks a lot about the security of the data, the access to the data, and so forth, but it really doesn't push hard on the fact that it does say, if I can contact you, I want my data removed, but there's no penalty factor to that. There's just that should be a function of it. This one with the CCPA, you really do have to be able to remove all components of data that you have and show that you have done it. I mean, the show how you did have done it is going to be probably the interesting interpretation, because you're going to actually have to technology wise show, the containment of the data's aggregation, to how you accumulated it to verify that this is all the data, and then the ability to identify and remove data. And that's going to be, there's going to probably be some new businesses that go out there that are going to be building vaults, of data, and the smart companies are going to be early to get those on, so that they show, just like with the ADA compliance, that you're making every effort possible. Because I think that's going to be a very important element, that if somebody chases you legally, one of the strongest defenses is nothing's perfect, but we're being as best as we can. We're doing all the things that we are and understand can be done. And yes, still there was a very smart hacker, and yes, that hacker did get into data, and we know that we had a breach. But if you show, as you pointed out, Kat, earlier in the first discussion about the article, true negligence, like I didn't try, I didn't care, that's a lot different than I really was doing everything I can and they still broke in and stole, the jewelry.
Right. And I think there's like a whole new really industry to be had here. And I'm sure that several people right now are scrambling to build companies around this. But I remember, way back in the day when we had a data breach at a hotel that I worked at, somebody was visiting sites they should not have been during their night audit shift and managed to download a credit card reading virus. And so the credit card company came in and did a training on PCI compliance, which used to be kind of the gold standard, right? Yeah. And now we have all of these other laws like GDPR and the CCPA. But really, for somebody to come in and do the training and almost be like an IT type person who can show them, okay, here's how you can streamline where the data is coming from, how you can timestamp it, how you can keep it somewhere so you're able to delete it later. Because I can almost guarantee you right now, most people have data fragmented all over the place and they wouldn't even know how to go about deleting all of the data that they had collected. I think if you're talking about a major company like a Google or a Facebook, because they are essentially data companies, let's be honest, that's pretty much their number one product, then they have a better handle on how they're storing the data because it's key to what they need to do with it. But for the average hotelier, it's going to be really difficult because they may have, some contracts over here and they may have some files over here and they may have an old PMS or a new PMS. It's going to be all over the place for them. So consultants who can come in and really give them a streamlined way to handle data properly to be in compliance with all these new laws and trends, I think is a whole emerging industry that we're going to see.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really curious to see, one of the articles had mentioned that when it comes to data, if you are looking to sell that data, you have to be able to place a dollar value on it of what that data is worth.
Yeah.
And talk about a gray area where each organization has different value on it. And then from the consumer side, is my data worth $10,000? Is that something I could go sell? Is that something for myself that I can
lifetime value? And if it has purchase intent and things like, it gets crazy. And Lily, you're right. With all these systems where the whole problem is it's a continuum. You have absolute privacy over here, and then you have convenience over here, right? And they are opposing forces that are in conflict, because you come in and go, wait, you're a member of our program and you do this and it's seamless. You don't have to do anything. All of our systems tie together, and it's not just our property, it ties into every property in the whole international, and that's fantastic. You don't have to check in. You can just, take your phone and check into any hotel. That, a lot of people go, wow, perfect. You go, yeah. So where's all the data doing that? Have you approved that your data can be in all of those systems? Because again, this other system in another hotel might, in a different jurisdiction, could be like, oh no, we use that with a restaurant across the street because actually we don't have the food service here. We do that with them, and we want to have extra service, so we want them to use the name of the guest and know where they're from, so it can be personalized and why they're. Watch out, right?
To be nostalgic, you think about the cracks in all of this. It used to be salespeople, their Rolodex was their goal. Okay, my Rolodex was my contacts and so forth. And as I did business at a hotel and I acquired more contacts, I, stapled their business card on a Rolodex card or something like this. And my Rolodex was my contacts. You think about all of the cracks to the security aspects of this. A salesperson uses a list to communicate with for, business growth for the hotel, but then retains that list as a means of thinking that when they leave, that's a good list for them to use at their new business. That's a
Would that ever happen?
Everything you just talked about, Yeah, because then at your point, you're culpable. I mean, that your hotel that they left from is culpable for that loss of data. And then at that point, do you pursue the individual? Do you pursue the new company because they used your data, but they didn't know it was their data? That wasn't their data to use because the salesperson says, "I got some people I know." I mean, it turns into a really nasty mess that a lot of lawyers make money off of.
And I think that's the other thing that we're going to see is, we think of these in terms of sales or revenue management or whatever, but in reality, this is also an HR issue. Like handbooks should be being updated across the country as we speak, and there should be trainings created during orientation that, people are trained on what that data is and that the employer has the option to hold the person liable if they cause that breach by essentially stealing the data from the hotel, taking it to their next job, etc. If then that comes back as a data breach where the hotel is held liable, that person shares some of the liability if it was an intentional, and you have to have that fine line too, because sure, there's going to be things that people do unintentionally that happen to expose data. And you just have to be very careful about how much you want to hold your individual employees liable for that.
Right. Yep. And you talk about the fact that there's convenience on one side and privacy on the other, but there's also the culture of work that we have now. For instance, agencies, third-party entities that are using data for their clients. You look at these agencies that hire a lot of youthful people. They want to use their own computers. They're very offended that you have to be handed a laptop that's locked down, that can't be used for anything other than the intent of the business and so forth. And they get very frustrated, and they end up bleeding a lot of data onto their own laptop because it's convenient. And that data literally from that client is on somebody's personal laptop that's lugging around in a backpack that gets picked up at a coffee shop as stolen stuff. I mean, you see it in the news once in a while from government people that lose their government laptop. But, this is something that happens all the time where, for convenience of use, it gets muddled as to where that excess of data has gone to. And even though the best lockdowns that you can only use this data in this location, always there's a breach. There always is a means of getting around that. It just, out of like, well, okay, if I move it over there, we'll take care of it later. And then the later never happens. It's those things that happen to it.
Cloud storage systems and backup. And again, it's the whole convenience. You can, if you have a problem, your computer gets backed over by, somebody's car. Hey, you can download this stuff right in. It's all there. Mm-hmm. That's not, somebody gets that password to the cloud store and all of a sudden, boom, you got everything.
Even in the world of agencies, and I'll give this as prime examples. For instance, Lily, you probably deal with this all the time as well, Robert as well. And Kat probably to some degree with Alhoa just for the security of the internalization. But, like I have password systems and I purposely use one gateway email, which is Omni@. Literally, it's our email that we use. So we ask clients to just allow us to get onto platforms for them. We just only want one email on there. And that email is tied to a password system that if I have anybody working on the program, the password and username are all dotted out. It's just they can go into the 1Password and log in, okay, but they don't see how to log in. They only have the authority to log in. So if I ever have to turn them off, I shut them out of the 1Password, boom, or off of that access to that folder for it, and they're out. Reality of it is, once they're in and they're in the administrative aspect of it, they can put themselves on. It's one of those things where we have to constantly go in and make sure. And we just, we had one where we were having problems logging in. It was actually easier for the person I had doing the analytics to put himself in the admin level temporarily to fix what needed to get fixed. And I had to go back in and make sure he got taken out so I could still walk around and say, yes, we're doing everything we can to be secure, because these things happen where sometimes just technology doesn't work and you have to do an end around, and then you have to make sure that, you don't leave too many open doors at that point. So even in the small scale, these things like CCPA and GDPR and all these mitigations that are going to come from these things, these are the things that you have to sit in front of a judge or a lawyer and go, yeah, that did happen. Yeah. Yeah, that we did have increased access, or that get moved onto a non-secured laptop or something, and you're sitting there going, "Dang."
Well, yeah, you put it. Somebody said, we need to do this, event, or we'll work up a little WordPress site. We can get that going really quick, and we can have it link over here, and it'll be because it's too hard to go through the official whatever channels. And you know what? We can go get MailChimp. Do that. And yeah, I know it's going to say MailChimp at the bottom because we're using the freemium version. Let's just go throw it together. It'll work. And all of a sudden, boom, you got a bunch of names in MailChimp. You got a bunch of, people probably loaded as subscribers who never subscribed to anything in your WordPress. And all of a sudden, you're in a bad situation. Right.
So I have a challenge idea for this upcoming year for all of us, since we have now the brain power. See, before I was just stuck with Robert, and Robert and I can't, get ourselves out of wet paper bag thinking intellectually. But now we have all this brain power. And I actually...
Sorry.
Drinking problems. All right. So here's my... This is a little bit sober. I actually had to apologize to Klaus at the ideas. I felt bad for my comment to him. Because Klaus went over and one is... I look at the people now trying to do video and so forth. They all of a sudden they woke up to this that we've been doing, all this time. Like, oh my gosh, I should do video. And he's walking around with an elf or something like this. And he was talking about convergence, that 2020 is the year for convergence. And he was talking about stuff, and we've been talking about it even in the time that we've been together earlier than they've been talking about it. So I kind of dagged at him a little bit on a comment saying, "Welcome to the choir." Great to have you on. And then I felt bad about it. So at the end of my comment, I says, and always thank you for your constant support for HSMAI and all the programs that talk about convergence. And to me right now, the frustrating part I have about this discussions is that everybody's saying the same thing over. We should be doing convergence. Convergence is important. These are the value propositions to it. I want to advance the conversation in 2020 with the fact that all of us are part of this conversation and have been for a while. What it actually means to do it. Advanced conversation, not it's important, not we should be thinking about it. If you're not doing it, you're going to be in trouble. That's hearsay. That's old news. The new news I want is this is a practical application to doing this. This is how a hotel does it, or this is how even organizational ownership does it. Because I'm constantly, even with new clients, where the revenue manager is talking in their world and the marketing person is doing their thing. And it's, I want to plug the two together from a real practicality point of view, because like I said, everyone's getting on the soapbox now. I mean, for large companies to actually start saying, oh, we're going to start doing convergence training. You're just, okay. We've been talking about that for 3 years now. So I think it'd be an interesting challenge going into the new year, the new decade, whatever, that we talk about more advanced stuff, because there's a lot of base stuff and it seems to be stuck there. Base understanding, base awareness, base usability. It's like, why not talk about some advanced stuff? Like, let's crack down on multivariant experimental ad campaigns that do 4 different programs of persona development or something. Dive into some meaty, chewy stuff, kind of stuff, where people go back and say, oh, you know what? I did not even know that existed. Or rather than just the generalized software conversation, my little soapbox for today. I was like,
You mean like how market segments aren't even real anymore?
Huh?
You mean like how market segments aren't even real anymore? If you look at market segments and channels, they basically are the same thing. People are calling channels market segments, essentially.
Well, yeah.
Actually, you ask anybody a difference between a channel and a segment, they can't give you an answer.
That's because they've gotten muddled, and market segments are intended to be groups of travelers who behave similarly in booking. Bar is not a market segment.
Yeah. Well, neither, and to Tim, now we're going to personify Tim here. Meta search is not a channel. But the idea of it is, and this goes back to, unfortunately, I think every industry has this. People love taking words, buzzwords, and throwing them around as if they understood them. And our industry is profoundly into that groove, where people will talk about blockchain and AI as if they understand the difference between machine learning versus AI, or what blockchain even is in comparison to cryptocurrency. They don't know the differences; they know the words.
Right.
Right.
And to go and now we're in these worlds where they hear these words and they don't know what they mean, so they become twisted, and the channels and segments are all one muddled conversation at this point. And
Yes.
and so too is the marketing strategy. People, I really do fear for people if the market takes a stronger downturn, which apparently it's not going to. It's going to take we're gliding, we're maintaining and gliding a little bit. But if it ever took a strong downturn for an unfortunate tragic reason, there's going to be so many companies that are going to be caught flat-footed, going,
Carnage.
yeah, I don't know what to do,
Yep.
and they don't
Yeah.
even know the methodology where to start, what to do. And none of the words that they understand are applicable because they don't even understand the words. And it sounds like gloom and doom, but I see this a lot,
And I think that that's really the interesting part, because on, the revenue side, we need to be doing advanced things like profitability and total revenue management. On the marketing side, we need to be doing advanced marketing tactics. On the sales side, we need to be doing advanced sales tactics. But when you talk convergence, we need to do the basics,
Mhm.
right? Like, I think that people confuse the two. Like, they need to do this massive, crazy thing over here, here, and here, and therefore they have to be able to operate on that level together. Sometimes it's just about getting the basics aligned, and that's why that's one of the main reasons that we launched Think Up, because we really want to put more of a focus on some of those advanced techniques and on convergence, which is a big part of what we're launching with Think Up. In fact, our number one assessment, we call it a diagnostic really, is the profit power shift, because we go in and look at how sales, marketing, and revenue are currently operating, and we design an integrated convergent action plan for the hotels that allows them to have 1 year to full convergence and profitability metrics. And so we're hopeful that we can help to get the word out too, through this and through other mediums, because I think that that's so important going into 20, as you're saying, Lauren, for all different types of hotels to be able to focus on this type of thing. And then of course you're going to come across the hotels that are still like, oh, we don't have a marketing department. And then you got to start from there. But or people who have a marketing department and their idea of marketing is, come stay with us because we have this many rooms and these amenities. It's not inspiring. It's not creating a story. It's not talking about the experience. So really taking that marketing to the next level as well, because marketing is all about emotion and experiential connection with your travelers. So you have to be able to create that emotional bond with your audience if you want your marketing to be effective and not just a billboard.
So,
Yep.
Kat, you get probably inundated with questions all the time from ownerships, because you have this. I mean, the one thing I've always been impressed with AHO is the generational component, the growth of ownerships, their desire to expand, grow, change their branding, the progression of branding that they get into, and so forth. And the owners are always faced with, beyond the practicality of operation. There's the reality of opening the door of a hotel and standing behind a desk and doing check-ins and cleaning rooms and maintaining product and so forth. And then there's the other component, which is to Lily's point, the experiential things, what drives them into the door, and I know from a lot of brands, their first push of value is that they're the ones that will do that for you. As a brand, I'm going to drive that to you. Brand awareness, brand recognition, brand contribution. And then as ownerships know, in time, there's a limitation to what that actually means, because there's brand saturation, brand dilution, brand competition, and those things, all the business that you think should be yours is going elsewhere because it's a similar brand or owned by the same organization or whatever. So how do you address this? Okay, you got to do marketing. You got to bring in an internalization thing, or at least some resource to it, to solve your own problem. I mean, what are some of the things that come across your desk, or what are some of the things you're pushing back to them, saying you need to focus on this? How do you handle that?
Well, one of the things that excuse me, I think came up on our last conversation on the show was that there needs to be like a tie between your revenue management team and your sales team. Those two need to have a clear and constant conversation with one another. But overall, on the marketing, we find that especially with our first and second gen, the social media aspects are highly left out. So oftentimes, just even saying, "Hey, have you started on that social media campaign? If we go to your website, what kind of pictures do you have up? How dated are they? How frequently do you look at your comments?" And some of the basic reputation management techniques of responding and as Lily was saying, creating that emotional tie. But being that our folks are much more reactionary than preventative, what we tend to do is at our convention, that's one of the areas that we can hit the most people in one time. We'll host a session based on marketing / social media, and then we host just different webinars and just try to get it in front of our members where possible. We did try to put together a workshop to do in-person education on it. Actually, last year with the California Hotel and Lodging Association, we did a workshop on enhancing your hotel's digital marketing strategy. Unfortunately, there weren't a lot of AHOA members in attendance, but it was a hands-on type workshop where you pulled up the website and we said a website health check and looked through it all. So, and then we've been tracking different periodicals or different publications that the industry produces, and social media marketing is definitely one of the top ones you consistently see as a headline. So what that's telling me is that it's just not sinking in. We need to keep having the conversation, in even repeating the same stuff over and over. Robert, what you were saying at the beginning of this, if folks just do the right thing, we wouldn't even need these laws.
Well,
It's across
Well,
the board.
it's doing the right thing, but it's also having, I mean, what Lily was, you've got to have the basic data and your processes set up, right? If you're just, everything's kind of everywhere and it's disorganized and there's nothing to pull to, you're going to have problems. I mean, it's with anything in life. If you're completely disorganized, you're going to have to spend a lot of effort doing things, and you may want to do things for the right reason, and your execution is just going to be off because you don't have the right processes even in place. So yeah, and it's incredibly important, especially with the hotel industry, with so much proprietary technology that is loosely interfaced at best. This whole everything on the convergent side, I think it all ultimately comes down to taking control over your own data and saying, this is our stuff, where is it, figuring it out, and then trying to take the little piece and going, okay, we can't boil the ocean, but where do we get the biggest impact? And let's fix this part, and if we fix this, then we can start building on the various aspects that go out from it, because you aren't going to go figure out your CRM system and it's personalizing the pricing through the RMS, isn't that great, and it's integrating with the PMS and it's out on the website. You're going to have really big problems, especially when somebody comes in and goes, why am I getting charged that rate? With everybody talking about Lauren talking about advanced things, let's go straight into attribute-based selling, that's super hyper personalized. Why wasn't that rate made available to me? I think I'm eligible, but I didn't get the $10 off, and boom, all of a sudden, where did that information come from? You shouldn't have had that information. That wasn't authorized, and the snowball rolls downhill.
Lily hit it right on the head. The first step is auditing.
Right.
First step is understanding where you are and what you're doing, because I mean, I'm not trying to call out one of my own clients, but they sent out an email for gift certificate sales, and the link that they sent, there was no link. I mean, the email they sent, there was nothing to do it. There was a phone number you could call, and it's like, so I was asking, so who answers this phone? Well, front desk or host or something. I'm like, as if they didn't have something else to do. Okay, why aren't you giving them the facility of actually converting what you just sent out toward? It was almost a wasted burn of the list, because the going through the process, like, use it as you would your guest. Is it doing what you want it to do? Is it functioning the way it is? When is the last time that your client has actually booked a room at their own hotel to realize that their booking engine is dysfunctional, or that there's garbage in there that they didn't even know existed, or that their rooms don't have descriptions the way they got, these things they rely upon outside sourcing, and nobody does their business better than the person that owns it. I will say this today, the same reason why when people bring us on board to do services for them, I always encourage them, if you want to increase bandwidth internally, no one will care more about your business than somebody that gets a paycheck with your signature on the bottom of it. So, some services are unaffordable to bring in, and that's where you need to have outside sourcing, but you should always have somebody internally that is directly responsible for that outside source performance, not let them do their thing. The worst thing you can ever do is bring an outside source that does the work and the reporting. Not good, because the reports will always make them look like rock stars, or they won't report what makes them look bad.
strategic delegation. That's what we'll call that. But uh, what what Lily was saying that you walk into a place and there is no marketing team at all. The conversation needs to keep happening on techniques when you have very minimal staff. More
Right.
ideally, we talk about rev management, getting group business, etc., and conversions. But you're talking to somebody with a full team. But when it's really the front desk that's converting folks. In addition to everything else they have going on, what thought went into that? The thought went into, okay, we need conversions. But yeah, that conversation of how, but then also how with this minimal team where one person may be cleaning, the breakfast area and then also jumping on some phones.
Right.
Um, More
Yeah.
strategic delegation
Hmm.
is needed.
So
Yeah.
I got a question off of YouTube. Tyra, Lily, a little bit more of what it is that you first look at when coming into a client. What are some of the early things that you look at? I guess is kind of what she's asking.
I'm just kind of assuming that this goes back to my point on the profit power shift assessment
Yeah,
and what we've been talking
the
about.
when you walk in the door for the annual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So first, of course, we meet with everybody within the team because we want to get individualized perspectives to avoid any groupthink, right? So first, we want to hear individually from each team member who's involved with the strategy to understand what's going on with them. We also dig into the systems and all of those related areas and draw sort of our own unbiased outside conclusion. Sometimes that will result in a lot of questions that we need to ask, but it avoids the kind of thinking that a lot of hotels will fall into where they're used to seeing things in a certain way. And so they become a little bit blinded to some of the opportunities or pitfalls that they're currently experiencing. So we look to uncover all of those, which vary widely by hotel. Sometimes we find that they're overspending on technology, sometimes underspending on technology. Sometimes they're doing things really right over here, but not very right over here. We did a vacation rental management company actually for one of these. It was very interesting because they were one of the cleanest data collectors ever. Like every data point you could possibly want, in their case for marketing and revenue management, was there, but they had no idea what to do with it or how to format it into reports or strategy.
Mhm.
So obviously that was pretty easy for us because we had the data there. If it goes the other way around, it can be more difficult. But
That's a good that's the best
the
situation
best
though.
situation to walk into. Yeah.
The other one is they want to do stuff. I had one client who's I've talked about on the show before, the ski area group. Their data was the worst I've seen, and I've seen a lot of bad data, but they were just missing about maybe a fifth to a quarter of it. Just
Right.
where is it? And they're using these outside firms who are cleaning things and householding and doing all this complicated. And it's like there's a leak someplace, and
Right.
there's a big puddle of stuff that you need to understand. Which in their case was like all their on mountain revenue, which was a major strategic point. So it's like you don't even know what you're doing. You don't have the data. How can you have strategies to fix it? You don't even know. You're standing on quicksand here. So, yeah, those are the really hard ones to fix. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's really important that you first just have a clear understanding of everything that's happening within the hotel, and then we start to solve for whatever that hotel's unique gaps are. Sometimes it's just education and there needs to be training around metrics or strategy. Sometimes it's a technology gap where they just need a little stopgap to help them with a process or two. Other times it's mindset shifts. And sometimes it's a total reallocation of human resources because we believe definitely in strengths-based positioning. So you may find out that your director of sales is actually highly analytical and does really well over here, but they're not necessarily inspiring their people to do creative selling or something like that. But maybe your revenue manager actually has a strong mind for the marketing side of things. So we look at the skill set of who's involved and recommend sort of a redeployment, if that makes sense, to make sure that they're leveraging each person's strengths and not leaving wasted human capital on the table. So those are some of the first things that we kind of focus on when we're coming in.
Robert, from I'm bad with name. Madrid. What are some
Any names with more than 2 syllables, Lauren just
blows it?
Yeah.
Torsina. Anyway, wants to know what are some cloud storage places that you feel are adequately secure?
Wow. I mean, certainly, and a lot of it has to do with, I mean, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google, they all have really, great platforms. The question is, how are you using it? So if you've got whatever, Google Docs, everything, your whole customer database is in a Google Doc where everybody knows the password, that's not so good. You can have that, maybe even be in a Google Doc where other systems can go access it and query it and do certain things if you set it up like that. And it can work just fine. It can be highly secured. So it's not necessarily the platform. It's all the integrations off of that and how that data is being accessed. Because again, that's the highlight I always use is Target. When they had their big hack, their central systems were like Fort Knox. You could not break into them. How did they get in? Through a maintenance access at basically at the cash register level, right? So they went into the individual, devices because, again, convenience. If we have a line that's hooked up to the internet and we can go to that actual unit that's not working properly, well, that's fantastic. We can go, oh, it's out of paper or something broke or, something's not, it can have all sorts of analytics and diagnostics. That's where they went in and they found the weakness. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we've got all this information off of everything that's going, credit card numbers and people and everything at that cash register level. They aren't supposed to be in there. It was for some maintenance tech thing, right? So that's the real issue of the whole system design.
Felix, maybe if you want to get some more clarity, but I guess in general, maybe Kat, I don't know, or Lily, because it may be applicable to both of your conversations. Felix is asking, what is the proper training method for hospitality? I don't know if that, Felix, if you're meaning from a convergence point of view, which is more towards Lily's conversation, or more from Kat's conversation as to initial awareness and internalization and structure. I don't know, but either way, we can definitely probably comment on both.
Old school, a chair and whip.
And we're not asking Robert that question because he's back from the 100-year period, back when Statler was doing that.
Statler was, I think, the chair. Actually, Statler did not do that.
I guess probably more towards you, Kat, on the staff training standards, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, starting, any brand is going to have its own onboarding process. I mean, that's like your basics. But outside of that, excuse me, I'd highly recommend, if possible, to actually find out the strengths and weaknesses of all your staff and then tailor training based on areas that they don't have or areas that they can cross-train with another area and learn more from. Training should be individualized whenever possible. There's certainly messages you could send out to the whole class in one shot and, what hospitality means and so on, but training should really be specific to the job at hand and what you want them to in the individual path of each staff member. It's such a broad question. It really
I'll take something from the Four Seasons thing, since Robert hasn't mentioned that for bingo cards today. As a GM, at hotels, I learned this from the first GM I ever worked with, who was phenomenal. But first impressions for staff members are so critical. And he brought in every new staff person and brought them into the nicest meeting room that we had, and we gave us a wonderful lunch and made sure that all of the department heads came in to personally introduce themselves to the new hires.
Absolutely.
Okay, and talk a little bit individually to them as to what they're looking. This is housekeeping training. This is front desk. It made no difference the strata of whom you were hired as.
Absolutely.
Everybody got this, and they also got a couple of nights to bring their family in before there's to stay at the hotel, to experience the hotel before they started working there. So They got a feel for what this place was all about. I know Four Seasons did that because when my wife worked for the Four Seasons, it was one of those things. But the first GM I worked with, that's what he had us do, is like, we want you to come and bring your family in over the weekend, whatever dates work for you. We want you to stay at the hotel. Everything at the restaurant is comfort dinner, so forth and so on. We want you to feel what this place is about. And then, and that first impression went so far, because then all the team felt like they were part of something, rather than, if I sign this, okay, hey Rob, we got a new hire, can you walk him around? This whole dismissive thing
Right. Yeah.
crushes.
You're
every-
another cog in the wheel. Get into
Yeah.
the assembly line and get to work. Yeah.
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 So,
Not good.
I'm
No.
sure there's no surprise as to how there's such a challenge with labor shortages and retaining staff. With
Yeah.
that honestly coming in the door, there's usually some opportunity to do things better. I think one of the other things I hear a lot of is that the role they're hired for is not the role they actually do
hmm
Right.
when they're there. So
I mean, going back to old stories when I was running hotels down in the Keys, I had a lot of housekeeping staff and engineering staff that were actually doctors and very educated people from the countries they came from, but they didn't understand, couldn't speak English. And so they could get only the job that they could be doing based on their ability to communicate. And this usually was because a cousin worked with somebody and they say, I can bring my cousin into work or whatever. And I had Renee teach them English because she speaks Spanish. She lived in Venezuela for years. And they would end up being able to go get a job, a better job. And it was, my people that I was working for were mad at me. It's like, why are you doing this? Why are you, these are very good workers, and you're teaching them now, they're going off to do something else. I'm like, yeah, but they always, and sure enough, their cousin, their brother, their nephew, they came in, and we did the same cycle over and over with this, is that we constantly went over and taught them how to be better.
Right. And you'll wind up having people, promoted within the organization. Now, if your organization doesn't have that career pathing and those opportunities available, right, you need to figure that out, because why keep people in jobs where they're overqualified, they can do more? All of a sudden they start becoming dissatisfied because they're like, well, I can do a lot more, I can contribute. All of a sudden their job doesn't mean as much, and you expect them to treat guests phenomenally.
Right.
I mean, that's a tough situation. The back to the Four Seasons thing, and having been there when we really transitioned from a small Canadian hotel group to the kind of what it is today. The policy was always, you hire for hospitality. You wanted to find someone who had a hospitality orientation and then train the job, right? And say, great, you're good at, you've got the right orientation. Now we're going to show you how to do this stuff. And all of a sudden things get a lot easier. But John Sharp, who is the president, when he interviewed GMs, what would he do? He'd go down, he'd sit himself at the opposite side of the lobby, he'd drop a little piece of paper, he'd walk over it, and then have the GM candidate walk over that path where there's a little piece of paper, not in his hotel, this is somebody else's hotel. And if the guy stopped and picked it up to go throw it in some trash, all of a sudden that was the indicator going, well, if he's going to do that on an interview where you're probably nervous and you don't want to do this, and if that's a natural response, boy, maybe those guys didn't always get the job, but that would be, this individual is really, got the right thing. They're cleaning up the lobby. I'm pretty sure the bellman or the houseman or whoever, housekeeper, if they see this person kind of chipping in and helping out, they'll probably be a little bit more motivated to do it. And that's okay. And the same with the housekeeper, with the talking boy. At one time, Four Seasons had 5 hotels in Texas, and the housekeepers got free rooms, right? For, I think, after 6 months, you got 3 nights or something like that. Huge cost, right? I mean, that is not a cheap property. And it wasn't that you got the crappy rooms. You were treated like any other guest. It didn't matter that you worked in another hotel. You had the experience, because that was the point. You wanted them to experience, because, again, economically, most of the upper management of Four Seasons weren't the target clientele for Four Seasons. Right? So, that was it. And, how can you possibly have someone who has never experienced luxury and service and is expected to do this flawlessly on a daily basis? How can you expect them to do it if they've never experienced it themselves? They've experienced it themselves, they'll get it and understand, oh, that's why they did that. Feels great. Now I understand the really little differences, right? That really change it from being fantastic to, yeah, that was fine. It was fine. You don't want, it was fine. You want, wow, they didn't have to do that. They're so nice.
So going to a topic, Kathy, you brought up earlier about social, and it seems to still be a gap point. There was an article that Robert put in about is this the end of social media? because of the declaration as to people's perception of social use. We are getting a bit of a rubber band effect on people saying that social media is such a deterioration of our culture that it creates unnecessary stress, it creates confusion, it creates polarity, on and on and on. And then the article refers to the percentage, which I found it I'm interested that they used Hong Kong as a data source, because Hong Kong has a unique skew going on right now. It's not exactly a normal world over there.
Well, yeah.
You know, so obviously this had to have happened in some capacity around that. But to your point of social, though, is like, how do we fix this? It is a gap point. Social is literally the last thing that it gets worked on correctly, yet it's the first thing that people consider in the world of if I could do something. So
it's low cost. It's one of the few channels that does not carry a lot of cost. Well, I had another question actually.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, we shifted into this. I just, Lily, actually, was for you. Just on the topic of the labor thing, before we move on, I wanted to ask you, when you go into a hotel, do you have an assessment period where you just kind of talk about the staff that's there and kind of figure out the strengths and weaknesses and kind of take a period before taking any action to just understand the staffing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we're doing a diagnostic or an assessment, there's a lot of research that goes into it. So typically we'll do some pre-research before we even visit the property. So we have an idea from our own perspective of what we're walking into. Ideally, we're also accessing the systems remotely at that period and kind of looking at things before it's influenced by anybody from the property.
Mhm.
And then we go and we meet with the property team specifically. Now, to be fair, we don't go in and say, what are your strengths and weaknesses or what are so-and-so strengths and weaknesses. We make that evaluation for ourselves by asking key questions around certain things that we want to know about. So we look at how they interpret the data. We look at how they are kind of interacting with other staff members, where their ideas come from. And my favorite, when their eyes twinkle. I know that sounds funny, but to me, that's always a sign of passion. Like if their eyes light up when we hit on a certain subject, it clicks that this is something that this person is passionate about. And that is so important in every role. So it's sort of somewhat subjective in some ways, the way that we analyze what people's strengths and weaknesses are, and then in other places very objective as we look at how they interpret data and things of that nature. But we try to look at it from both standpoints, if that sort of answers the question. But
Yeah.
certainly the report doesn't come out till all of our evaluation period is done. So we aren't necessarily drawing any conclusions. And even when we do, we try to offer up 2 or 3 potential scenarios, because it's good to have options. If something doesn't work out the way that they anticipated or that we anticipated, they have a few different things that they can work from as sort of a playbook.
It's interesting. When I used to be GM, when I was GMing between hotels, when I was going to a new hotel, I'd always ask the ownership, can I come visit the hotel without them knowing who I am first?
Yeah.
And spend time there. And then when I came in, I actually asked if I could just do a baseline job where I would be working in the restaurant or, front desk or something, to get a sense of the culture or the communication of how people felt and talked about. And then finally, when it was announced that I was there, you get a lot of raised eyebrows, like, "Oh, crap!" He was helping me change beds or something. I thought he was just a houseman or something. But then sitting down with them individually. But then this is where I think I differ with you, is I would also then get people into a group room, and I do a group think where I would talk to them individually and see what their perceptions were, as you say, what their passions are, what their interest is, what their if they chip on the shoulder, they're mad at the world, whatever it is, and then I get them in a room and see how they're different. Because everybody acts different when they're in front of their peers. They'll talk about their peers, but they won't talk about their peers in front of them, and to hear how their conversations were. And I made it an absolute rule to myself that unless it was a critical safety component, to have no opinion or to change anything for at least 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And that way I could just watch. And then, because some things can get propped up artificially for a short period of time, but they can't last for 2 weeks artificially. Somebody's going to break their persona or they're going to go back to their old ways, or something's going to go back to what was being done wrong, but they knew it was wrong, but they just wanted to show off that it was maybe being fixed. And after then 2 weeks, then I would start saying, okay, here's a list of how we need to start approaching some things. So same evaluation period. And it is good. It's brilliant that you're doing that, because, so often these agencies get hired and they want to show off first.
Right.
Oh, look at all the stuff we're ready to change. We're going to make the world change. We got some hot lists for you. And they're walking in from an outside perception. And, things are done for a reason. Okay. It may be dysfunctional, but they're being done a certain way because that's the end, the solution that got created. Maybe you can find a new way of doing it. And sometimes, nope, actually the dysfunction works. It may not be standard, but it does work. So, not going in and just breaking it because you know that it should be done a different way is the worst thing that most people do. And then there's other managers that want to show off that they're a manager. I'm in charge. Stomp, stomp, stomp. This is my space.
Well, they're gonna change out the staff. They're gonna change the processes. They're gonna we're gonna get new system. We're just gonna the clean slate approach. And boy, continuity wise and understanding that, as you're saying, that kind of cultural knowledge of that organization. You're right. They're doing something really weird, but it's like, oh, there isn't any other way to make sure that such and such is done right. You have to have those people double check everything. Really? And all of a sudden you find, oh yeah, you got some system limitation where they didn't buy this module because it was expensive or something. And you've got people who weren't trained on it and they just came up with some crazy method to try to fix it. But they're trying to do the right thing, right?
And that I think is also really important when you're looking at an assessment from an agency in particular. And one of the ways that we try to be different so that it's more applicable, we don't just tell people what they should be doing, but we evaluate the operational impact of each thing. And we kind of prep them for, hey, if you go this route, you may need a change in the staff, or you may need more training, or you may need this. Like, here's how much we think it's going to cost, but here's the benefit that we see. So really getting into some of the nitty gritty, because we have that operational background, there's a lot of great ideas out there, but if you don't understand the operational impact and how to actually get to the idea, then it's really not going to work for you. So it has to be sort of a balanced perspective. You've got to have the ideation, you've got to have the fresh thinking, you've got to break things apart a little bit to understand how they're working right now, because there may just be a nut or a bolt that needs to be tightened, and really the process itself is not broken, or the process may need to be completely reworked, or it may be totally fine as it is. You have to go in with that sort of unbiased perspective so that you're not just doing the clean slate, or you're not just assuming what's in place is working. It's sort of looking at everything uniquely and not trying to take a cookie cutter approach, to use a very
one of the biggest questions, and Bonnie Buckheiser, who traveled with me for Rocket and for HSMI, called this Xerox training, where the person who was trained on the platform then trained the person behind them, and that person trained the person behind them. But the person that trained on the platform, only retained 40% of their training. So only 40% of the training was conveyed to the next person. And out of that, only 20% was retained, and on and on. So one of my first questions whenever I approached was, when was the last time, or is the person that was originally trained on these systems still on the team? And if they're not on the team, then we need to find somebody to get trained again, because a lot of solutions come from the fact that a lack of awareness that maybe what you're using just isn't being used to its full potential. Right. So it's one of the earliest questions I ask is like, hey, when was the last time we actually got to, what's the last iteration of this? What's the, what update? Who was the last person trained on this? And sometimes a lot of this is junk and we got to get rid of this and we got to change the world with this. We need to do this, do that. Like you say, sometimes just putting new wheels on the cart. The cart's fine. Right. We just need new wheels.
I'll tell you what, people the most underused thing in hospitality, I swear, is a written process manual, like with screenshots. I remember way back in the day when I was a night auditor, and I wasn't meant to be a night auditor, but we had somebody leave unexpectedly. I was actually the front office supervisor, and I ended up on night audit, and I was like, okay, this is never going to happen again. And it was a very manual night audit process, which is probably why I liked it. There was a lot of balancing and whatnot, so there were a lot of very key steps. Really, we were working as sort of the accounting auditor on night audit. And so the manual that I ended up putting together was 60 pages, but it was because it included screenshots like click here, click here. And then you don't have to worry about losing that knowledge because it's right there printed and it explains like you're doing this because this and this and this. Here's how you do it step by step. And I think if more people would just take the time, it's tedious, sure, but taking the time to put together guides like that for some of those key processes that don't change on a regular basis, that, you know, if everybody got hit by a bus or was on the bus, that they could really literally retrain themselves from the manual and not have to rely so much on the Xerox training or playing telephone, as I like to call it. If you remember
Yep.
that from
Yep.
childhood.
I'll put a link in but there is a platform that I have that creates these kind of training processes with screen grabs and, you know, where you actually show the process of it. And that gives a centralization to it. It's a neat platform about, of all places, AppSumo. It's kind of fun for it. But to your point, I've also had it where there's a blindness to it, where I had a night auditor and I was doing audit, and because of somebody getting sick, I was a GM, and you know, everybody's got to pull their weight on something like this. And so I'm doing night audit, and I get to a point and I didn't understand what I was doing. So I called the sick night auditor, and all she could tell me is to do backspace, carriage, right. And I'm like, I'm looking at the screen. She's like, I don't know what screen. Like, I don't look at the screen. It's backspace, carriage, right. And I'm like, that's not helping me. I have no idea what that is, you know. But
wow.
yeah. But they
I just do these keystrokes and everything's now. Yeah, just
it's what they do for keystrokes. But yeah,
Yeah.
there is method to the madness of having an SOP to these processes, but not to get so wrapped up in the SOP that turns into a Bible.
Yeah.
Because
right.
it has
Or
to be
to keep it updated, right? When
Right.
something changes, there's a version update on the software or something like that, and then all of a sudden the process is different. But again, a lot of that should fall on the at least the framework should fall on the tech provider, right? And again, that's been a woefully an area that's been woefully underfunded because the hoteliers don't really want to pay for training for that. So can't they just do it themselves, make it easy, just give us the bare minimum basics to get by and run the thing? And they don't have like all the screenshots and here's how you do it and here's why we do it, or any customization for, oh yeah, you now have this module in here that's going to do the spa stuff, or it's going to pull in things from the golf course or something like that, which then all of a sudden can create a lot of complexity
So
depending on
I
how
have a
that's
question.
being
Like,
posted.
when you're stepping into these properties, are you seeing marketing plans? Are you seeing it on the shelf? Or are you seeing it in, do they even have this anywhere? It used to be marketing plan was a big ring binder that was a tome. And, thou shalt in January produce this, and thou shalt in February do this, and it was kind of like just erase the year and put the new year on it, and the dates shifted.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I see a lot of marketing plans where the verbiage sounds very, very, very similar to last year's marketing plan.
Yeah.
And I think the main thing that it comes down to is deadlines and kind of the politics of what people want to see. Like, well, this isn't giving me the results that I wanted, so it should be this instead, but not even really looking at the results. So even though it starts out with the best intentions, oftentimes it sort of devolves, as does budget on the revenue management side. So I think that it's really important that, hoteliers understand that, sure, they need to produce a marketing plan for their ownership or for their franchise management company, but this is the opportunity where they are giving you time to focus on what your plan should be. Now, frankly, I don't think once a year is a great idea. I think they should be
quarterly.
90-day sprints. You might have sort of a framework for the year, but every 90 days you should be re-updating it because things change so quickly. I mean, what if we had a Black Swan event mid-March and the economy tanked? Would you still run off the same marketing plan that you were using when you thought that everything was going to be flat in 2020? Hopefully not. But a lot of people just kind of write them up, put them on the shelf, and get a great idea every couple weeks and do that instead, unless they have an ownership who holds them to it. And then at the last minute, they're like, oh, we have to make sure that we've hit this, check this box. Let's quick put something out without a lot of forethought. So again, you have to have people who are actually passionate about what they're doing and want to create that content as well.
Karen out of Memphis was laughing, saying she says, I still have a ring binder.
but the key on that is translating that into processes, right? So the marketing plan should have the overall kind of the philosophy, the objectives, and the core strategies of here's what we're going to do. But again, on that quarterly basis, you need to come in and say, okay, here's what we did. There needs to be some sort of assessment process where you go,
Right.
here's what we did. What worked well is very, very important to evaluate, right?
Yeah.
Here's what we did. This is great. Plus, it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, good job to people,
Yeah.
which is very, very important instead of just you missed this stuff over here. But then where you had gaps, what was the gap? Why did that happen? And what are we going to do to address it, right? That's a
Right.
really, really important thing. And then once you figured out what you're going to, well, what's the process? Are we going to change the process we had in the past? Are we coming up with a new thing? Or are we just tweaking part of it? Or are we going to measure something different because we found out that, hey, there's a new variable that, that must be what's driving it. We don't know. You've got to do that because then you're going to get better. And then all of a sudden you get this cycle for kind of continuous improvement based on the metrics you set. You had objectives and strategies, which hopefully have metrics that can be measured. And then you can see how you did against them. And if you had a gap, then you can say, hey, here's what we're going to improve. Here are the new metrics, and you can start over. And if you do that, it works pretty well in my experience. I don't know.
Well, from our approachability, what we do when we do very similar to what you do, Lily, maybe in a different concept. We approach it from whatever their goal orientation is, and we create an audit around it, and then go backwards. But one of the first things we do is start gathering the data immediately, because to your point, there's three components to it. There's the strategy of what you anticipate, the strategy of what you know, and then the strategy of how to adapt to what you don't.
Right.
And for us, we accumulate data because it's a matter of affirmation. Once we've been with a client over a year, we start comparing the data we have now compared to the data we had then at the same time. And is something changed? Has something, and I mean data in the sense of, are the same people walking in the door from the same feeder markets? With the rate differences that we've done, is that impacting who's walking in the door? We constantly ask the what questions and the how questions in comparison to the data. Now, yes, there's pivotal event-driven things, there's business cycle things, there's calendar things that, yes, I know Valentine's is going to be different this year because it's landing on President's Day weekend, and it means it's going to be a long weekend. We can really blow up the event compared to last year where it landed flat in the middle of the week. There's variations to these things, but that, and looking at the data, and to your point, Robert, did it change? Should we change because of it? Or do we just stay course? And the difficult part of it is the self of creating truth. If you're only pursuing one type of market and you're getting business from that market, then you think that's the only market you should get. The constant testing, the need to go over and try things, just because it was tried once, it may have just been the wrong time to try that. Doesn't mean it was the wrong idea. It just may have been the wrong time to try that. So looking at and seeing what else is available, what other options are there? Is this the only way to do this? Is the only people that are coming in?
Right.
Just because we advertise to Japan and we're getting a lot of Japanese guests, does that mean that we shouldn't be advertising to Malaysia or something like that? Because we didn't do it, or last year we tried it and it didn't work, whatever. So that's the real flexibility of a plan. Because I'm saying this because of what Karen was asking. She was saying, so where do you start? So this is kind of how we tackle it, stepping in, is like, what do we have right now? What do we think is possible? And constantly measure whether or not we're right or wrong from it. So.
Right. We really, like, when we look at the checklist of what we're going over in these diagnostics, we talk about what is the market doing? What is the comp set doing? Those are pretty standard for people to look at. But then we do how we got here, looking back at the plans and how they materialized. To Robert's point, what's our current benchmarking? Did things work out the way we said that they were going to work out in our last marketing plan, which this is a great time of year for that. What's coming up, looking ahead at the future opportunities and trends. A lot of the things that we talk about here with the different trends that are coming up, have you even considered those in your marketing plan, or are you still using your internal knowledge to set these marketing plans? What should we do about it? A detailed look at all of the upcoming trends and how you want to actually leverage them. Who should be involved? When should we do it? And what resources do we need to accomplish this? So those are all really key, we think, as we're looking through what's coming up for different hotels, so that they can be focused on all of those different building blocks that make up a good strategy. And I think if more hotels took a piece-by-piece approach like that, honestly, we'd generate much better budgets and marketing plans than we are today.
Absolutely. Plus, getting those objectives into strategies. If you start looking at, and we mentioned it a little bit earlier, you said, the difference between the segments and the channels, and I would say the personas also, right? So we're looking, it's a Valentine's weekend. We're looking for whatever as tactical as you may get. We're trying to build, whatever romance business or something. Well, okay, who are we? What's the persona that we're looking for? Okay, and they roll into such and such segments, so you can measure. And then how are you going to get them channel wise? Then you can start making some intelligent decisions based on, okay, what are kind of the pillars of your campaign to kind of when should this be happening? What should the messaging be? And then all of a sudden it starts to make sense. But all of a sudden you go, push February, push mid-February business, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a marketing plan.
push February midweek, or weekend. It's like, well, wait, when's Valentine's Day falling or whatever?
How? Through what channels?
Here's
Why? Oh, no. Just do it. Just get the thing done. Yeah.
So here's a little tidbit of something interesting for this Valentine's that's paying off early for us, for one of our clients. We're advertising to the grandparents to stay at the hotel because the parents would like a romantic opportunity. They're not going to go to the hotel. But the grandparents, oftentimes parents, especially younger parents, who are still romantically inclinated for Valentine's, want a chance to get away. And it's not because the kids are at home. So for them, they need a built-in babysitter.
Right.
And so we've started targeting the grandparents to come and stay, be at the hotel. They get their romantic time too, by the way. But the value of it is that they get to take care of the kids while the parents have a wonderful time, going out to dinner, whatever it may be. But we found that we actually struck a chord where it's not about showing off the rose petals and champagne in the room, in as much as it is, come visit the kids.
Yeah.
And what about anti-Valentine's or Singles Day? Are we doing anything around those?
No, I haven't hit on the singles side because, well, actually, no, take that back. It's something we've talked about with the restaurants in San Antonio, where it's like, removing the stigma that you have to not go out to dinner if you're alone on Valentine's because it's going to be a sad story. Instead, it's like, no, make it a joyous one that you get to have a quality dinner without having to be all gussied up or whatever. So it might be something there for them. But yeah, and there's always an angle that you think is opposite of what the standardized perception of it is. And, everybody has a reason for what they're interested in doing for different dates for different reasons. So.
Yeah, and I do think because Singles Day, if I'm not mistaken, it falls relatively close, doesn't it? Or is that in fall?
I think it's in the fall, but you know what? That's a good question to ask because I didn't look at it from that as it was just a marketing say of, hey, look, you know what?
Yeah, November 11th.
Come out to eat, enjoy yourself, and pamper yourself. Don't worry about the fact if you're not with somebody.
I'm being a really good example of what I'm about to say right now, which is that people aren't really thinking about Singles Day till the last minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a huge thing to capitalize on. And so, honestly, it happens with Valentine's Day too, but with the major holidays, you see a little bit more proactivity. But, they kind of wait till, our November's not shaping up that great. Singles Day is next week. Let's put something out about that.
That's a little late. Yeah.
So, you have to really be proactive. And are you looking at all of those things in your marketing plan?
Speaking of which, I did have a topic I wanted to throw in that was not on your list, Robert, but I thought it was very interesting of the surprise that most of people had in market of how short our holiday period was. It feels like everyone got caught flat-footed with this. Like they didn't look at the calendar and realize that we lost a week because of how Thanksgiving and Christmas landed, because even the retail on the news, year over year we're down, blah, blah, blah. It's a surprise to everyone that, it was a week less to do shopping. I'm like, what's a surprise? It's been on the calendar the whole time, and it's not like people aren't going to go over advertise Christmas in the middle of Halloween, because they did, they did back in September. So I don't think it's really like, we can't advertise that early because it's it's not in the holiday. No, they did that way ahead of time. But from even a hotelier point of view, I had a lot of people coming to me going, our pickup for our New Year's Eve celebration is behind. Normally we have XYZ by this point. I'm like, when did we start doing this? When did you start doing this? And we sent the first email right after Thanksgiving. Well, that's a whole week later than you normally did for this thing. So you have less days for people to make this choice. And when it comes to our guests, all of us are rather myopic. Whatever the holiday is right in front of us is what we're focused on. And until we get past that, we don't think about the next one. And then, Christmas and New Year's are so close. Usually people start picking up their interest in New Year's after they get past the Christmas thing. In the January is kind of a flat month. So
Easter moving around is a big one. right?
Oh, yeah,
Easter, it's like,
for sure.
oh, it's in March. What? It's like-
I will say though that to some degree it is contingent on the guests. Now you should have a plan in advance, but just because Thanksgiving falls a week later doesn't necessarily mean that if you advertise at the same time, you're going to get pickup at the same time. Because unfortunately, in many cases, it is the travel consumer who's not thinking about the next holiday till it passes. I mean, I was literally just doing some pickup reports this morning, and yesterday was a great day of pickup for January for most of our clients because, oh, surprise, suddenly Christmas is over and we can think about something beyond Christmas. And now people are booking their work trips for the first week in January when normally they would book 30 to 60 days ahead of time. But for whatever reason, people delay because they're so consumed with what's coming up with Christmas and New Year's. And so this week is often very overlooked.
Mm-hmm. Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Oh, well, shall we drop back onto the social content? Because we kind of, we dropped back onto that one again. That was just my little soapbox thing.
My other veer where I had was when Robert mentioned it's a nice experience when you test out the hotel so you get a better angle of selling it. And I thought about the capsule hotel in Milan that Robert had sent a link for. And I don't know if I want to test out those capsules.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting one because again, yeah, they started out kind of at airports and things like that, and now they're starting to move in. And the more you get, the value of space, if you can start doing those. I mean, Yotel has been fairly successful. Certainly, the Pod hotels
Pod Hotel in
New York,
Square.
New York do quite well, right? They generally have like a market leading price, or they're down there in the. If they don't have a market leading price, then their margins are great, right? They're doing something really great to create value there. But I think those are the sorts of things that you look at and go, these are trends where people would go, no, I would only stay in one of those when I have to. Oh, yeah, that's a different way of staying there, and that's less expensive, or maybe there's certain other aspects of it. Same thing with hostels, right? Where hostels now are starting to morph a little bit, where you can get private rooms and ensuite baths and things like that, where it's not just the dorm room. So all those different types of lodging, things are getting interesting. So.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, absolutely. I really had two thoughts when I first looked at this. And the first was, oh, this is kind of like a hostel, but with privacy, where you basically are just getting a bed. And then they echoed that exactly from the tourist quote that they had in there. And then two was, my brother basically lives on a tour bus, and it's the same exact thing. Where they just have this bunk that's basically, it reminds me of a coffin, to be honest. It's just big enough to fit a human body, right? And then there's a shared bath down the hall. But I think it's, people find it unique because they don't live in situations like that. But then you've got the tour people who would do anything to not pay for a hotel like that because that's how they live the rest of the time. So it really just kind of depends on where you're coming from. But for sure, it's very economical, and really just makes me think back to when we were talking about the new room created by Super 8 and how they are now having the community room and things like that. And my comment about maybe the future of revenue management is charging by the square foot. Maybe that's how pricing is. I mean, that's really how realty is done, right? Real estate is often by the square foot. So it would be interesting to see that become a new trend as well in revenue management, that's sort of a pricing guideline for.
I mean, look at our food and beverage. There is actually revenue benchmarks based on square footage usage for your open space. I mean, what's your yield for your commercial square footage? So,
and most hotels, when they're developed, that is a fundamental factor, because you wind up looking at some sort of best use analysis for it, and you go, yeah, this is what we need to generate, per square foot, and then all of a sudden, I think that's one of the challenges with Embassy Suites, which is one of my favorite. I think Embassy Suites was just, when they came out, a terrific brand, very different. People love it, but you don't see as many of them as you kind of think there should be, because it gets down to space utilization, kind of that bay and a half type, size. You're going, well, are you getting a 50% price premium on it? It's like, no, And plus you're doing the food and beverage stuff and everything else, which adds some cost. And it's like, oh, this doesn't work out as well except in these markets, which is
Right.
kind of a shame, right? But that's one of the fundamental things is what's the revenue per square foot. So
And
it's not
really,
RevPAR.
frankly, most of the airlines are doing this right now anyway, because you've got your like economy, like more legroom is just more square footage. And that's what you're paying for. You're paying for space.
Mhm.
So, I think that there's a couple things that we're going to be seeing coming up, which are square footage, which are around the clock check-in and check-out. How long are you actually using the room for? These are the big things that I always hope that secretly someone out there is developing a strong competitor to Opera for full service hotels that want advanced PMS stuff.
Ha! Oh, I'm sorry.
I know. But if anybody needs an advisor, you just hit me up. I am happy to share my thoughts. But, building a system that has the flexibility to incorporate these new trends, I think is going to be so key. And we've got about 1 million of them for limited service or limited functionality that are approachable to build, right? That's the main thing is the dollar investment, I think. But
Oh, absolutely.
I don't know, maybe
the risk.
I'll hit
Well,
up.
that's Oracle's problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll hit up Travis here, I hear, or Expedia guy who have a couple million or $1 billion available at their disposal. See if they want to build a system for
Build something, yeah.
But Oracle's problem is still the vast majority of their installed base are on the legacy platforms, right? Because look at what Oracle bought Micros Fidelia, right? What did they do with the POS platform? That is all cloud-based now, right? Everything, Dunkin', all the cool stuff that Starbucks does and Dunkin' and everything, that is driven by Oracle and the cloud. Their more full-service restaurant stuff is doing dynamic menu creation and looking at the whole supply chain. Hey, there's we've got access to pork or whatever, chicken at some sort of special pricing or some sort of supply chain disruption. All that stuff can flow through and change. It's amazing. And you go, oh, well, so you're doing that with the hotel. And it's like, nah, it's really hard because all that proprietary firewalled, stuff of that vendor lock-in, all of a sudden as you change the core system, you got to go change 20 other interfaces, which, oh, none of those folks are in business anymore. There's nobody, or they've been rolled up by some other company who's just their business model is maintenance contracts, right? They aren't doing any system enhancement. So it's like, nope, we aren't fixing that. And you get
I'll
no
also throw a
problem.
cautionary flag out too, that from people looking at who they bring in as third-party support, that exists in that ecosystem as well. There's a lot of third-party agencies that have swallowed up other service profiles and have incorporated it into their service profile, and they don't have the depth of development of what they inherited or what they purchased, acquired, to really sustain its flexible requirements as demand creates them. And they're large-scale agency groups that have that. The really good, strong ones, and I'll call out Milestone does an incredible job of keeping their whole ecosystem built within themselves. They built everything themselves. Where then if you look at Ascendine, they acquired things. So there's two different processes. They offer the same stack of services, but what they can create flexible wise or integration is really based on, you need to take a very close look at which one is the better service profile for you, because both can offer you the services, but one can be adaptive and the other one can't if you need it. And if you don't need it, then of course, then you have a different set of criteria. But these things that you're talking about just don't exist on one side of the other side of the conversation as well. That they're out there like that as well.
Yeah. Well, and Lily, it will happen. It's just I'm not exactly sure when. At some point, and Citizen M was the pioneer, right? Because Michael Levy, who used to be the head of Synixis, smart tech-oriented guy, is the CEO of Citizen M, and he came up with we're going to set up this enterprise service bus, and it is our data. And the functionality and the system should be bolted on to our data stream so we can protect it. We can do all the stuff we need to do, and then we can give whatever features access. And that's what he's done. And it works pretty well. Citizen M's operate pretty damn efficiently. So that's great. But now the question is the roadmap for everybody else to get there is
Right.
very, very difficult because you can't rely on the tech providers because they're like, well, we need ROI. Can we get a large group of hotels to commit to doing this, and kind of so we can investment spend so we know there's ROI.
Clients to sign a petition.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody
That's
wishes that they
the
were a
thing.
competitor that
The
could catch
brands,
up.
the brands won't do it because they need to make an ROI on their tech resources and they don't want any risk, right? The owners are too fragmented to go do that. The management companies are like, my God, we're just trying to figure out what these damn things are, and and trying to keep this thing cobbled together. So all that fragmentation is really, really it creates, the bottom line is who's going to pay for it, right?
Right.
And how do you reduce the risk for everybody? And I don't know. That's a really, really complicated, scenario. So you have some folks like Happy, for Happy Cloud, things like that, who are like, yeah, we'll do the database and you can start bolting things on, but it's still the pain of either ripping out part of the property management system or adding another platform that's going to run in parallel and link into it for a while. And again, this vendor lock-in, they go, oh, if you're going to go do that, you better go wait 9 months and spend 30 grand to get the thing certified. And
Right.
oh, by the way, if you're planning on taking business away from us, maybe you're going to be on the real slow track sort of thing, and you're never going to get certified. That's really tough. And then then each property that does it has to go pay $5,000 for that integration. You've got all these walls that are structurally set up. It's tough.
So I definitely want to make sure we don't miss the social conversation, because I think, Kat, you brought it up earlier in the conversation. It's the gap point. It's the first desire, but it's the last acquired. And it always comes down to acquisition of resources, externalization, internalization, methodology, and I know from the article's perspective, they're talking about the fact that it's apparent in some statistical relevance that it's not as much of an influence to the travel decision process. I think that's the catalyst of the conversation, but more importantly, I don't see that actually happening per se, but also you made the really great point. That's, if any dark hole that's persistent, that's a dark hole that's persistent. They just don't know or don't have the idea of how to solve it. So any insights from how you guys are tackling it or how you're approaching it? What are the ways that, I know you try to put resources in front of people, but what are the things that you're looking at?
I'll say with our group in particular, just looking at AHOA, it's a very specific niche market. They are peer driven. So what we are doing to kind of influence it a little bit more is having the leaders, such as our regional directors, utilize it more. So they're communicating more through WhatsApp. They're communicating via Facebook, and our LinkedIn channels and our Instagram and Twitter. So it's creating a familiarity amongst the other owners that are seeing it and saying, wow, this first gen or second gen individual is fully capable of using this platform. I should be able to as well, professionally and personally or socially. So that's one way we're attacking it, outside of just putting the education out there, is showing that others similar to themselves have adopted it, even when it's a more apparent technological challenge for those that have adopted it. One of the other things in this article had mentioned was that I want to say to like Instagram and the different social media are actually taking the individual away from the experience. So instead of them being a part of that drink they just ordered, they're instead undained in just what they're reading and seeing. So I'm not sure if that's as much something I would side with, because I would say the folks that are definitely in the Facebook world, they're sitting by the pool and doing it. They're sitting in your lobby and doing it. They're utilizing your facilities and continuously ordering drinks while they're doing it. So even if they're not staring at that, beautiful array of colors from the plants that you all just planted, they're still contributing to your bottom line without taking note of that and Instagramming it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think one thing that from somebody that's very much into this, that's an influencer, when I was out with him, he had to take pictures of his food, and I was like, okay. And he says, yep, camera has to eat first. And because the idea of these people, those that are building their branding, all of us have the opportunity to build our own branding. But those that are trying to make the business out of it, This is their methodology, that everything has to be, and I'm a guilty person of it too, is that whenever I travel or do stuff, I just take video footage because I need video from clients' perspective. I needed video footage of me walking around New York, not me walking around New York, walking around New York, because I needed video B-roll for my clients in New York, of New York. And, you can buy this stuff, but so can somebody else. And the worst thing in the world is to look like somebody else. So, the more that you own, the more you can use. So, I carry my 360 camera around. I carry my POV camera around, my phone around. I'm constantly taking these kind of pictures and so forth because, one, it chronicles what I do, but also it gives me resources to do it with, because we are that visual medium now. And social is a visual medium platform. Facebook was spot on. Come this next 2020, almost 80% of their total traffic is video, and don't even try to do a post that doesn't have a picture in it anymore. Right. That's just wasting your time.
Same with Twitter. Twitter isn't that great for it, but everything is visual. Instagram's the killer.
Everything is visual. I have a presentation I have to do in Central Florida HSMAI coming up. And the predication of the conversation was, we need to know what's going on in social. Should we be worried about TikTok?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, guys, you do know what TikTok is? No, you have no clue, right? So, you're asking about a platform and a medium. Sure, it's growing, but who's using it? Why are they using it? What's it being used for? Just the same things of, if anybody walked in your office and you were in a hotel and said, hey, we got this billboard for sale on highway whatever. First off, is that highway coming to you? Is it people that you drive down? You ask the same questions. Is it really worth it? I'm not saying a billboard's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm saying, is it a good or a bad thing for you? Are the people that would be seeing it or using it the people that you're wanting to come into your hotel? Not just because it's funny. We race to being the shiny object, but we don't take care of the baselines. And that goes to your social statement, is sometimes it's just responding to the guest feedback. Block step 1. Thank you for commenting, or sorry you had this, just base stuff. And then maybe from that, the occasional, wow, that was really great fireworks we had on the beach. Not room and rate, but just comment, join the conversation, see what you can participate in.
Start taking the price out of the equation a little bit, because that's not the thing we're consuming.
No, it's a social media. It's not, it's like I always tell people, it's like if you walked into a stadium, what 100,000 people sound like. Is that you can't hear any individual conversation, but you're 100,000 of them. Then you walk up to a group of people, you still hear blah, 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 blah. But then as you get down to a smaller and smaller group, you begin to interpret, you get to hear the conversation. And the first thing you do is you don't walk up and go, hi, I sell hotel rooms and I got a rate tonight. You listen. Is this even a conversation I need to be in? And if it is an interesting conversation, can I contribute to it? And if I can contribute to it, what can I contribute that they're going to want to hear? And then eventually, once they begin to listen to you and so forth, then you can talk about yourself. I mean, it's like when you pitch a company. Oh, there's my little puppy. You don't go in and start talking about yourself. The worst thing that agencies do is they walk in and they talk about themselves.
Right.
The best is to first listen to them and see what they do, what they want. And if they're interested in you, they'll ask you.
Yeah.
So I'm actually going to jump in a second. I'm so sorry. I actually have to step out. I have to go grab my little baby. So I'll have to leave you all. That I wanted to mention, I think I just invented a word. I was trying to say inundated, and I said indated, and somehow. So,
hey, we knew what you meant, so this is a good thing. It was a useful word.
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute, let me look this up, and it said there's just nothing. It's
not there.
That's a problem. I apologize about that. But I do have to drop away. I know there's so many other great things. This ties in so nicely to that Hyatt article as well, with the 14 things.
Oh, now I put an asterisk. I do not agree with that article. Yeah. I throw those in for just discussion. It's like this. What the hell?
Like it's compliance. Like the doors need to be smaller. Isn't that? Like, doesn't a wheelchair have to fit through?
Right. They don't want any of those unsightly, special needs people around. What the heck are these people thinking?
I love the larger mugs. I need larger mugs in my room, otherwise I'm not coming back.
Yes.
Very important. Very
Yeah.
important.
But again, that you get people doing stuff like this, and my whole point out of that was, how do you react properly with these things? Do you take it point by point? Do you just ignore it because a lot of it was just so inane? But
Without
again,
snorting your coffee when you're listening to them, yeah, that kind of thing. No, Kat, before you go, people want to know more about you or be able to make contact with you. Where is it they can go, and how can they contact you?
So Kat Mohammed, once again, Director of Education for AHOA. You can reach me at kat.m.speaks@gmail.com. That is the easiest way to get to me. And if you have any questions related to AHOA or not on professional development, training, human trafficking, anything I can help with, I'm happy.
Human trafficking. I'm actually going to talk to you about trying to get certified. And for no other reason other than I think it's worth to be doing that, and that I can include that in my conversations, which I have started to do thanks to you. To every client I talk to is like, hey, some of my questions besides the ADA compliance, GDPRs, and so forth is, have you guys actually looked at getting certified, or what is your awareness of human trafficking? And
no, it's combating human trafficking, Lauren. We make that very clear.
Well, I wasn't using.
You don't want to be certified in human trafficking. That's very bad.
No, my clients understand what I mean. But Kat, thank you for joining us.
Okay, that's good.
Happy New Year, and we'll talk to you next year.
Happy New Year.
See you next year. Bye.
Bye, Kat. Yeah, the 14 Sheraton
Human
Point thing.
trafficking should not be a channel or a segment, right, Lily?
No.
That is
Correct.
all agree
Whatever
on that.
terminology you want to use for it.
None of the above. None of the above.
I mean, it could be a segment that you want.
Now the
zero
revenue
of in your
manager.
mix.
The revenue manager. The revenue management monster has been born. Under certain circumstances, we could compromise. Yeah.
No,
No.
business should be turned away.
Just to be clear, it is a segment is a group of people that behave and travel in similar ways. So it may actually be a segment. That doesn't necessarily it's a segment you want to have or attract.
That's right. Yeah.
Well,
of course,
that line in your budget would be good.
Of course, Lily has now made a note. Evaluate profitability of human trafficking. No, do not do that.
Now, there was a platform. I don't know if
what's the length of stay? And they don't require housekeeping
if we were going to go that way, there are quite a few criminal enterprises that have great profitability margins.
We should just
really
do certainly. Well, the gun running type thing that can be problematic. So the drug dealers,
the drugs,
the drug cartels are so demanding, though. That is really the problem. I think
they're
really demanding.
There have been platforms, and I'm a bit of an advocate for it on certain markets, like New York in particular, Miami, large hub destinations, where you can do segmented half days where you arrived really early or really late. You only need a few hours before you have to go to the next whatever it is. And if you can, there was platforms that tried to do this, but it was always looked at in the way we're laughing about what we're talking about of, you only want the room for a few hours, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there's times, and I mean, especially when I was doing back and forth in China, all I wanted to do was crash somewhere. I didn't want to sit in the lobby for another 5 hours before my room was ready, And before I had to go to an office, just give me a few hours. Let me go take a shower, change clothes or whatever. Just give me a room for a couple of hours. And then, I have to go do something. There is demand for that.
Right.
And it takes a very skillful revenue manager and operations, because you're trashing and retrashing a room. You got to sell that room to a whole night customer, after that person's left, even no matter how neat they are. I want the room, done and clean and green. So, it takes a skill set to do that, but there's markets like that.
I don't think it should be that hard in technology, honestly, because I mean, even if you look at if either of you use a calendaring app, you can actually have it look at your availability on Outlook, right? And you can say what amount of a buffer that you need. So if you know that you need 2 hours to clean a room, why can't there be a system that says, okay, somebody wants to check in from here to here, check the availability plus a 2-hour buffer, and then you know exactly when you need housekeepers to come in and out of the hotel because they should be cleaning this room at this time and this room at this time, etc.
Well, and that's one of the functionalities of your new wouldn't somebody build a new PMS, because
Exactly.
you don't want to be file based. I mean, a lot of these are very much it's based on a date, the inner workings of the system are based on kind of this file of rates, right? Maybe with certain date ranges, but they're days, they aren't hours, right? And to
Right.
do that, all of a sudden that would just you have to reorganize the whole underlying database structure. But you're right, all these things need to be turned into rules-based systems where on one side you go, here are these rooms, they have these various features, they have these various things, and they are available on this sort of availability, again, rules-based at these sorts of rates, rules-based for these kind of customers, rules-based. Yes, that you can upgrade the IBM corporate person into that. That's okay if you're, under certain circumstances. All of that can be done. The technology is very easy, but you've got to blow up the system, build that, and then plug in all the other stuff everybody's using. That's
Can you imagine having, because we have API accesses and so forth, and I think of this from the New York perspective, when somebody's flying in because you know what flight they came from, because you know the flight, if they didn't give it from the origin they come from. So you know when the flight's arriving, you know the delay time from they get to the airport, getting through customs, getting into their car, or getting into an Uber and your hotel. You have this information. How amazing would it be if you can coordinate your internal operations structure to be able to accommodate that, so you're not having an hour and a half line at the front desk for check-ins because you had the flood of all the arrivals from the international market that flew overnight, and make it so that you have this plan and pre-plan. Wow, wouldn't it help hospitality? Because now instead
the
of
airlines
people,
are going to do that. The airlines are going to try their damnedest to do it with one order, though. And that's the thing. They're going to have the itinerary. They're going to say, hey, you just booked your flight. Do you want to? Okay, yes, you can go to the lounge before you leave, or you can use lounge access on your connection in Tokyo or whatever you want to do. You can get your advanced boarding, you can get your preferred seating, you can get your bags checked, all that sort of stuff. And then they're going to say, hey, how do you want to get from the airport to wherever you're going? Would you like a facility? Because again, for their super high level, your 1K member or something like that, you get your little or was it concierge, whatever Americans is? I'm not part of it. Yes, you get driven around in the car, but from gate to gate, you aren't walking in the terminal,
right?
Sort of thing. So if you can do all that and then say, how do you want to get to the hotel? Oh, what happens when you check into the hotel, and you can start integrating all those touch points and have status updates and notifications. It's huge.
Even one step farther than that, what if you had multiple properties in a single market? And if you had the flexibility of knowing what your availabilities were so you could flow it. And if I, as a guest, didn't really matter whether I was in Hotel A versus Hotel B, but I had a for the hotel, then you're talking about full circle of, okay, not only is the flight arranging my travel, but my travel is arranging my stay based on, I want my room. I want to get in my room. And Hotel A doesn't have the accommodation availability when I'm getting off the plane, but Hotel B does. Maybe Hotel A was going to, but something happened, and now I'm being moved over to Hotel B.
Well, a long time ago, CRSs started doing like alternate availability. That was kind of what they called it, right? Where you'd search for one and then you get others, and that's still kind of kludgy where there are separate processes. But again, we built pre-internet for an economy lodging group because we found around a classic was Toronto. Get your bingo cards, Journey's End. Very, very infrequently mentioned. But what would happen is people they'd want to stay on the west side of the city. And you've got a big lake on the south side, which helps things from a logistics perspective. You only have 180 degrees to worry about instead of 360. But they'd want to stay over there, and it was sold out. And then they'd try the next one. Well, we built some things to kind of go, well, here are the next ones, and to just show a very, very thin slice of what was open, what had pricing. That's all you could kind of see. And then all of a sudden you go, this is sold out. And instead of having to check 3 different places, just go, there's one that's 40 miles away. It's same position, other side of the city. And they were fine with that because they wanted that segment wanted an inexpensive hotel within striking distance to Toronto, right? They didn't want to split downtown.
He doesn't care.
And but the conversion rates on those were huge. I mean, that was just, yes, we have a product for what you're looking at, but you don't make them go find the needle in the haystack. Queries, different. the Marriott site, sorry, Marriott, it is just horrible for doing that, right? You can't filter by price. You can't do these things. You can't filter out very well by destination. You look in New York City and there's just this massive properties and dots. You can't tell what's priced what brand. There are no visual cues on a map or something to even show you what's going on with these guys. And it's just really subpar when you go and look at Hotwire or something like that, which you can filter by neighborhood and you can see all the hotels and you can
Last
filter
week
out
we talked about
rate
this,
by
where does
ratings.
Expedia
Right?
go? Where does Expedia go? This might be a place where it goes, where since it has the fluidity of connectivity to so many different places, and it has the ability to cancel and reschedule and rebook and so forth
Yep.
on hotels and in transportation and
You
in
bet.
flight, that this is the level they get into, saying, don't worry about it. We'll get you there. We'll
Right.
get you where you're going to stay, and you're going to stay in a place that is of your standard that you want. It just may not be Hotel A or Hotel B, B, it might be Hotel C. It might be not this transportation Uber, it might be Lyft, but it'll be the same quality car. And it might not be American Airlines,
Oh.
it might be United.
But they'll
Right?
let you pick.
Hotwire?
They'll let you pick and then take the and then pay for the upgrade or what, which is what Hotwire kind of does. If you don't want to know the hotel brand, you can save, but it's introducing a little bit of risk, although they've eliminated a lot of that by giving people the counts on ratings. But still, you can kind of go in and go, oh, if I just want X hotel in this, I'll take a shot and I'll pay $80 a night, or seeing the hotel, I'll pay $100 a night, or oh, I want an upgraded hotel, I'll pay 120, 150, whatever it may be. That's how people shop. And again, a lot of the major hotels, even Room Key, they don't really have the guest rating stuff in an easy filter type thing, because all of the don't let them sort by quality. That will let them see that we've got some crappy hotels in here. Well, maybe you shouldn't have crappy hotels. That would be the starting point.
Yeah.
So
Lily, is there an article, because we're just looking, as we're already on 2 hours, is there an article that you didn't want us to miss before we get to the route row? Because there was a couple of good ones, Robert, you dropped in there. Even though you said the news was a little light, there were a couple of good
every
ones.
once in a while, I'll get one. Yeah.
No, I really I forget the name of the article now. I don't have it up right at the moment, but it was talking about what's actually important to business travelers, and I just wanted to point out that coffee is indeed important to me in the morning, and I do not want to have to go a few floors away to get. But we always have lobby coffee when you don't have a coffee maker. So this is an appeal to all hotels. Please reinstate the coffee maker in the room or coffee service that comes to.
I am not a civil person before my coffee, and I have no interest in looking like I dressed up to get coffee. I'll walk down.
I want to get dressed up to get coffee.
Okay. Wait a second. Full disclosure, Lauren, are you a civil person after coffee, or do you want to get dressed up after? He doesn't do either, really.
Yeah. So. Let's put it this way: it's me in a bathrobe, or me dressed up at least in clothing that's publicly available. I mean, the first one you do not want to see. The second one is barely bearable anyway.
I liked the Wyndham thing with they did a La Quinta survey, and they're talking about business travelers. The bare necessities, 64% of business travelers think it would be harder to go without high-speed Wi-Fi than clean underwear on a business trip. Okay,
well,
that is
difficult if that's the only criteria.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I actually, I'll send you a link to this. I got it on Amazon. It's the size of a thermos, and it uses the little Nespresso coffee capsules. And it has a lithium battery, and I keep it charged, and I can actually make coffee, espresso coffee with this thing, with cold water even. So it's not like you have to have hot water. Put the cold water in, it'll heat the water up, pressurize it, and give you a cup of coffee. And I literally bought that because I got sick and tired of going to hotels. And, we have lobby coffee. And it's great lobby coffee. Yeah, but I got to go to the lobby to get it.
Well, and to be fair, those that do have coffee makers, often the coffee is the worst thing I've ever tasted. I don't want to drink it anyway. So that there is that. But I love when people are using Illy or an espresso, because this actually, years ago when I did my first ever kind of CompSet tour in San Francisco, I didn't realize there were cities where they didn't offer coffee makers standard. And I'm like, oh, where's the coffee maker? You have a mini bar, but no coffee maker. And I never quite understood the point of that. And then, we have them on request, but a limited number. It's just inconvenient. I don't.
Right.
Why would people do that. It's not that.
And I found a hotel in Denver that was a halfway point. They had coffee in the lobby, but every floor they had the ice machine and they had a coffee maker.
Oh yeah. Yeah, they have a coffee station.
But you still have to leave your room. If I have
Right.
to leave my room, I might
Right.
as well go to the lobby. It doesn't really matter, but I just don't want to interact before I've had my coffee, to be completely honest.
Yep.
And I like to be efficient, so I like to brew the coffee while I'm showering or whatever the case
Exactly.
may be, so that it's ready and it follows the normal. It's really about following the same sort of order that you have at home. That's what
Mhm.
people want. They
See-
want to be able to do that, and I guarantee at home I never have to go to the lobby for coffee.
And see, Ed's not here. Ed normally stays in 6-star places where, the butler comes in, and that's his number one complaint. If while he's showering, the butlers, they're grinding the beans, they're making too much noise on that, they're doing cold pressed, that.
I thought he
taking
got
too
that
long.
coffee that came through the cat. That coffee, I thought that was his favorite. And they had to, Anyways,
No.
so
But no, I just wanted to say I loved these Wyndham stats that came out. I don't know what this right now. I'm working on a high-speed internet project, and we're going to be interviewing a bunch of hoteliers and a bunch of customers to see, or guests to see if there's a gap between these things and what's really important. But these questions were so great. They asked, for some reason, they now found that a quarter of male business travelers, 28%, have been hungover during a meeting or presentation while on a business trip, compared to 14% for female business travelers. They had questions on, are you hungover when you're doing meetings? They've asked about people having their stomachs grumble during presentations. 80% of the people are stacking up on food from the hotel breakfast bar to eat later in the day, which I think is a very interesting stat. And you guys, 34% of business travelers say drinking coffee or tea is one of the most important ways to prepare for work while traveling. I'm surprised that was that low. That 34%, that seems, really.
I've all
really
gone through a cycle of our travels where we used to go to conferences, and the first thing we did was on the first evening of events, made the second day regrettable because we went out and just went crazy with everybody drinking and going insane. And now I go to conferences, and the first thing I want to do is just like, okay, good to see everyone. See you tomorrow, and go to sleep. Because it's like,
That's
now,
because you're elderly now, Lauren.
I know I'm elderly. It's kicking in where it's like, I'm not able to go the next day perky if I was out the night before, where the night before was like, yeah, whatever. But also too, I do notice it is a experience driven thing. The younger or the new to the business travel world, man, they drop the suitcase and they're out the door to be wherever they're at. And me, by the time I get to the hotel, it's like drop the bag, crack the laptop. I gotta get caught up with wherever I'm at. And then, be there for whatever I'm doing kind of stuff. And then at the end of the event, maybe, nice dinner, glass of wine kind of thing. But these people, I mean, you got to someone like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I'm like, okay, you guys have fun. And no.
Well, you got and actually there was the earlier one. It was a Skyscanner research project, which they came up with a great term, because the big thing's FOMO, right? That's it, fear of missing out. That's why everybody does it. But they had JOMO, which was joy of missing out, which I thought which they were using in terms of unplugging, right? You aren't using your devices and things like that. But I think JOMO is a great thing. So is that your JOMO, your joy of missing out on all?
Joy of missing out now. It's like, I want to see you all perky in the next morning while you were out. I mean, I had friends though. Honest to goodness, there was an exec chef that I used to work with. 5 a.m. he was still pounding shots. 6 a.m. he was in the kitchen. You couldn't tell he even went out that night.
ITB Berlin. Let me tell you, that's it. So
amazing the resilience stuff. But anyway, let's not miss on the rut row, because I have a little story to share with that on this. But the rut row of Mr. Uber going off into the ghost kitchen land.
Yeah. So Travis Kalanick, who was the highly storied CEO of Uber, not reportedly the greatest guy on the planet. Kind of what happens if you put a bro in charge of your organization? So he is now divested completely of all of his Uber holdings, right? All of his billions, he's out. He's completely cashed in. And now he's going to do ghost kitchens, which I think is a huge. I'm sorry, Kat isn't on this. This is going to be a really rough thing for the hotel industry, I think,
It
because the whole differentiation through food and beverage and being able to do cool things and deliver, all of a sudden you're going to have, well, and not just the hotel industry, but the overall restaurant industry. These can be highly disruptive and highly detrimental to the to all these little small businesses in a destination. Boy, these could get wiped out by these ghost kitchens.
Okay, I have a story about ghost kitchens, and it's a good story. And this is something that hotels can pattern themselves off of.
Mhm.
Okay, so there's this hotel in Vancouver, had a large conference space and had a huge banquet kitchen. They decided they wanted to convert their conference space because they just weren't able to sell it anymore. There's too many other new places in town, too many other big spaces, and so forth. They wanted to convert it into more usable space. They made some common spaces, kind of WeWorkish lobby area,
Yeah.
so to speak. But they also increased their room inventory. They took up a whole area that was the big ballroom and made it. But they still had the banquet kitchen. And one of the questions was what to do with it. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure in the kitchen to build it, piping, gassing, all this other stuff. Much more expensive to tear it out than it is to see what we can get as function. So they created Ghost Kitchen. And the Ghost Kitchen has 6 menus to it. All 6 menus are available. There's, they kept they have 2 restaurant spaces, and they kept all 6 menus available to those 2 restaurant spaces. But the banquet kitchen, being banquet kitchen, was closer to their loading dock. Okay, big loading dock in the back.
Yeah.
So what they did was they set up delivery stations all along their loading dock. Easy and convenient. People drive in, never disrupt the hotel guests or anything like that. And so they would come in and they would have all the different, Grubhub and this and this and this to pick up all the stuff. And they had 6 different menus running. All those 6 menus were also available to the hotel above, restaurants below, but they killed it in the market because now they have 6 restaurants running basically, okay, out of the back end of this thing,
Right.
shoving out with all the, and they're not doing the delivery. All these, platforms, Uber Eats, everything else is just slamming this out. Their big configuration was how to package and how to make it, deliverable quality food where it's not the typical pizza burger crap and the soggy French fries, but, really neat restaurant food that looks pretty too. It has to be delivered a certain way, has to be in suspended containers and what have you. And of course, being in Vancouver, it can't be styrofoam and all this other stuff. It has to be, degradable and all that. And they are just crushing it. So any hotel that has the facility to expand their menu and they can't get the seatings, the butts in the chairs in their restaurant should go tilt towards and say, well, great, then let's offer it to market and offer it to delivery. Keeps our food and beverage going upstairs for what we need to sell, but it also gives us full localization to our market. So there is a solution to it. It should scare the heck out of hotels because if you're trying to fill your restaurant, the hotel isn't doing it.
Can the hotels offer reasonable room service, right? And if you have an operation like that, can you have your room service pricing be somewhere slightly lower than the stratosphere, right? With a whole bunch of hidden tacked on fees. I mean, room service is a punishing experience in a lot of hotels, right? Because you go, wow, I'm going to pay $17 for the burger or whatever, and I'm not going to get a salad because I don't want to spend an extra 12. Whatever you're ordering, you make all these compromises because then they get it and they slap you with a 20% service charge plus a $5 delivery fee and you're sitting there going, I just got something that if I had gone downstairs or walked out the door, I could have gotten for a quarter of the price, and the value proposition isn't there. And then they wonder why don't people order room service, right? It's like because you're punishing them
because there's no coffee maker in the room, Robert.
Exactly. Yeah, but I mean that's
like,
but if they can do that, that would be huge. You go, hey, we've got a restaurant, we can do an extension of the restaurant menu and serve it hot and quick. I mean, if you can get it hot and quick to somebody who's down the block, 5 blocks away, you should be able to get it up your elevators, sort of thing. So.
It goes to a couple of things too when it comes to room service. One, it should be as cheap, if not cheaper in some capacity, because you have the convenience of being able to deliver it internally.
And Richard Branson is doing that with Virgin Hotels. He's come down and said, no, room service should be affordable. It should be priced just like
every hotel I ever ran with room service. Immediately the prices were at the same, if not cheaper, than was having it in the restaurant itself. Because to me, in my mind and also all the carts, I elevated them by 6 inches. It took me, a dear friend that was in a wheelchair actually was the one that inspired me to do that. Because she brought me around to realize that, the carts, the desks, things like this, wheelchairs, okay? So if you just raise it by
On
6
the bed,
inches.
a lot of people sit on the beds, right?
Yeah.
And you can't. All of a sudden, the cart's
cart's down by their knee, right?
Yep.
And so, the food's cold, and on top of it, they can't eat it well, and all the other stuff. So yeah, it's a mess.
And
so,
you don't want them taking all the plates and things, putting them on the bed, jumping on the bed, having the thing flip over and making a mess.
And usually the desk there, it has their junk on it already, if not already their computer. That's the reason why they're having food in their room. They
Right.
didn't want to have to leave their room. So, make it comfortable that the cart itself, because then, like I said, everything stays contained. And, leave the hot box. That was another thing I did, was I put hot boxes on all of them, because that way, just because I rolled into your room with your food didn't mean you wanted to eat it right then. So I left them the availability of saying, the food's down below if you want to go over and keep it warm until you're ready for it or whatever. And all of that stuff made it where room service our sales went through the roof because we were actually accommodating the value proposition of why you were eating in your room.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah.
Accommodating the value proposition.
I know, right?
I had
Food
never
is-
thought of anything
No.
close to that. That's just that's such a foreign, revolutionary idea.
I know, right? Hey, Louis, thanks for joining us. You kind of came a little late for us, but thanks for joining us on this. We're kind of wrapping up with the Rot Row today. I hope you get to go back and play the show back. Just, Louis, so you know, we do a simulcast Wednesday at 11:30 London time, which I think puts you on this hour before it, I think, or on the same time zone. I'll have to go look at the time grid. So you can play back. There's the live, but there are also the link for the replay will be there as well in the show notes. So you can play back whatever you want, but we do a replay at 11:30 London time. So no, we're glad you made it, Louis. No worries. Anytime you want to join the conversation, you're more than welcome to. We had somebody else from Madrid today too. Name I couldn't pronounce. So yeah.
Probably one of those Spanish names. I don't know why. So
You came back from skiing. Okay, we're not going to talk to you anymore, Louis.
there's one. I want to know the burning question that came up earlier. I didn't have to. Why does your brother live on a tour bus?
Oh,
So
Is
my
he,
brother-
is this,
yes.
hopefully this is voluntary.
Yes.
He is a musician or actor?
manager. So he lives in Nashville. He's a tour manager for various acts. He's also, that's kind of his recent thing. He used to be more guitar tech, but he's worked for Grace Potter and Tim McGraw and
Oh,
a
very cool.
variety of other people. So
Excellent.
yeah, it's an interesting life for sure. I don't think he's on tour right now, but whenever they do go on tour, interestingly, they really just save a lot of money by not putting the crew in the hotels. So they've got
Right.
the crew bus and they've got the artist bus. So the artist gets all the preferential treatment. The crew usually sleeps in their little coffins on the bus
Yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why. Good point. He is not in the hotel industry and sleeping on a bus. But,
Oh, no, that's good. No, back in my early school, well, actually throughout my school days, I was on the concert commission, and so we had a lot of national touring acts that go work out at colleges before hitting kind of the national tour, because we had a great promoter who had some big venues in New Jersey and New York. It was. I mean, those guys, those crews are just unheralded because they're showing up at 6, 7 a.m. depending on the complexity of the setup, and guys up there in the rafters with the rigging, flying the lights and getting the raw stage built, everything connected, not electrocuting. It's amazing that performers don't get electrocuted with all that current flying on stage.
Yeah. So, you know what, Louis, this is a formal invitation to have you join us on the show because you would have a very interesting perspective of tour bus. See, tour buses in the States, the competition that they represent is very different than the tour buses I would understand to be in Europe. Because the tour buses in Europe really are multi-generational, where tour buses in the States tend to be less dynamic. They tend to be more on the certain clientele by age categories or not use tour buses. Where I know tour buses. I've used them when I've traveled, and they're a very reliant part of the economy over there. It'd be fun to have you on the show to talk about your experiences. How do the hotels interact with the tour bus companies? How do you derive your business? What percentage of business? What are some of the value propositions that hotels offer to tour buses? what have you. Yeah.
It's a big business in the U.S. too. I mean, you got all these Globus and
Oh, I used to sit down from this when I
massive-
was in sales. I used to sit down to do the tour bus, the pitch and woo where you sat and the tour bus operators would go in succession to all of the hotels' representations, the like speed dating. And you had to pitch your product to them and hopefully convince them that they wanted to pick up inventory and so forth.
Yeah.
And a lot of the questions are about parking space and, navigation capabilities. What are you giving our drivers and our tour operators? What is the packaging, for food, blah, blah, can you prepackage and what have you. So, yeah, it'd be fun. It would really, Louis, you're more than welcome next week. Just pop into the room, let us know you're here, and I can kick on your camera and everything else like that. And we'd love to hear your perspective of it.
And talk about a segment that can produce really well for you if you adapt to their needs.
Yes.
And you can really figure out, you've got all these people arriving and you've got 44 people or whatever, showing up in one shot. How do you get them registered quick? And a lot of it is, key distribution, because they aren't going to be sitting there with the mobile app and things like that to be able to go do this stuff. I mean, you may be able to do some things like that, which would be very cool in advance,
right.
But depending on how advanced they are, but a lot of it, it's key distribution on the bus. It's rooming lists. It's adapting where people have met each other. They want to make changes.
Well, also too,
like
Louis, if you can add this into your repertoire conversation, is the demise of Thomas Cook and what the fallout, and now they're carving up the different sections now. People have the different ownership groups have picked up different hotel groups and stuff. Because I know from just my personal experience in Europe, from my wife being in Holland and so forth, that. And we've been talking over there with conferences and all that, some hotels were purely reliant upon the relationship of that bus pulling in at certain times a year. That was their business, being in that circuit when they traveled. So, now with the demise of some platforms like that, and how it's getting recarved, is it changed your world a lot. So it'd be a good conversation. Appreciate it if you would, Louis. That'd be great.
Oh, and actually there was one that I didn't put in that I meant to do. I guess I didn't make the cut. I was intending it to. Was they were talking about TUI and what TUI's doing over in Europe and kind of changing things in the post Thomas Cook environment, which was again very, very interesting, because people go, oh yeah, TUI. Well, they got 410 properties, and they aren't just little 20-room B&Bs sort of thing. These are large destination resorts that do a lot of business, and it's a big segment.
Yeah. All right. It's been 2 hours and 20 minutes. Louis, thank you for joining us. And we look forward to you being on the show next week with us, because it sounds like it will be a fun conversation. Lily, one question. Did we hear more about Expedia CEO candidates? No, not yet, except for it's going to cost about, $12 million for the old one to get kicked out. I think that was in one of your news articles.
From our... which isn't bad. The interesting thing is, when we were talking about Uber, when Dara Khosrowshahi went from Expedia over to Uber, where he is, I think, doing a good job. It's just a tough company, right? I mean, he walked away from about $200 million in unvested stock options at Expedia, which is a big hit. But again, I'm sure he did very, very well with Uber's public offering, but now Uber's down, so I don't know where that's all netting out for him. But for the last CEO for Mark, he basically got $12 million to say goodbye. And
Robert's just bitter because they turned down his application. They said that they appreciate his interest in the position, and however,
I think, given my rather rocky history with Expedia, I don't think I would be considered with them. So I've been a little bit too outspoken.
Hiring me, I would much rather have somebody encourage me to step down for $12 million. That's the track I'm working on now. So.
It's to pay me not to be there. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, right. I did apply. All right, so
but now that you work with yourself, right? Yeah, you work for yourself. You basically have to, if you're schizophrenic or whatever, that may help.
$1 million.
Dissociative personality disorder. Now you're going to have one personality go out and take a massive loan and just mortgage the house and everything, but then to pay off the other personality to get out of there.
Now I'm in a rental, so mortgaging the house actually could be very good for me.
Oh well, yeah. If you can
That's
mortgage,
a whole different solution.
That. Yep. Again, we're learning more about Lily and kind of that whole evil side. It's that whole. for all the marketing people and the sales people watching, you're right. The revenue managers really are evil. They think this way. Yeah, they're very devious. So yeah,
We're creative.
So,
it's
so
what,
Lily,
it's
people,
what you thought the whole time. Yeah.
so Lily, if people want to know more about you and more about what you do, where is it they can find you?
You can find me at tcrmservices.com. I am the CEO of that company where we provide day-to-day task force, and also thinkupenterprises.com where we provide consulting and technology services with a website to be launching here probably within the next 2 weeks.
Woohoo! And Mr. Cole, not that we want to follow you on Twitter because we know how dangerous that can be.
Well, you can find me. I am now the personal agent for Louis Boucher, who is, I believe, a candidate for the Expedia CEO position, and I'm just hoping to get my 15%, and that's the yeah. So. Oh yeah, lol. Now I think LOL. It's either in French or Spanish. I'm not sure that means like definitely you've got it. I think is his response to that. So anyway, but no, you can find me at Mortimer. Yeah, he's dying laughing. Don't die. You've got to. Yeah, you've got to accept the position so I get paid first. So anyway, Robert Cole. You can find me at rockcheetah.com or Robert K. Cole on social media.
And thanks again for Kat for joining us earlier. And we ran out of time for Ed and Stuart and Tim today. Sorry, guys, because we just didn't want you on the show early.
Well, it was a vote by the viewers of the show, and it was pretty much unanimous. They did not want them on.
Did not want them on.
What could we do?
Unanimous for Lily, unanimous for Kat to be here.
Yes, obviously.
That was about it.
And I'm very sad. I'm going to be missing my first show in the run. I think next week, one of those pesky paying clients needs me on site for a conversion. So
getting in the way of a decent show time. Yeah.
There's the dedication. I think Kat said she had to pick up a child or something like. I mean, putting family and business before the show. Lauren and I don't do that. No,
nothing's more important than being that.
Nothing is more important than this. Yes, exactly.
With that in mind, if you would like to play back the show, Louis, obviously you can go to this link as well. It'll be there in about an hour. And that is at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Look for show 229.
Is this a sleep shot picture? Let's see what he's no, it's a picture. Well, he's kind of the sleep shot style of him. Louis has a particular, what would you call a composition approach to photos where he has his mouth open in the corner of the picture. So very nicely done.
Yep.
And that, I don't recognize the one in the center. That it looks almost exactly like Louis there. So I don't know. That must be an older child that I didn't know. I'm not sure.
So with that in mind, thank you everyone for watching us on multiple platforms. For Tito as well and Karen. I don't know if you're still there or not, but for the rest of everyone, thank you so much for watching the show. For this show, we'll be rebroadcasted at 11:30 London time on Wednesday next week. Oh no, Thursday. Excuse me, I bumped it to Thursday because of the holidays. My apologies. 11:30 on Thursday next week, and also to 11:30 for our APAC or Asian Pacific region people Sydney time on Thursday. I didn't want to land on the New Year's, so the next Thursday will be there. So, with that in mind, thank you everyone, and we look forward to next week, next New Year, 2020, new decade, all that kind of good stuff for show number 230 of this week in hospitality marketing. So that in mind, goodbye everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hopefully Lauren will be sobered up with 2 days after New Year's Eve, right? So that should hopefully work out. So
traveling with hangovers. All right, here we go.